So good evening, everyone. My name's George Cohout. I'm the chair of the planning board. And as this is a joint public hearing between the planning board and the city council committee on legislative matters, Chairman Dwight of the legislative matters and I have swapped these duties at different public hearings. So we're opening up a public hearing for a proposed zoning ordinance amendment to allow two-family homes by right within all residential districts. So I thought we'd just real quickly, for folks who are new to public hearings like this and on Zoom, we just walk through the process to give you a quick summary of what the evening will look like. And please, Carolyn or Laura or Bill, jump in case we miss something. But we're gonna open up the meeting. Carolyn Mish from the planning office will provide a little background to the amendments that we have in front of us. We will open up the discussion between the Committee for Legislative Matters and the Planning Board just to kind of clarify some items. Then we'll open it up to the public for comments and observations. We'll ask the public to, try to limit yourself to 2 to 3 minutes of sharing. There's quite a good crowd here. We'll call on everybody one time before someone speaks a second time. When we think the public has exhausted or run through their comments, we'll turn it back to the planning board and the Committee for Legislative Matters, which will have some more discussion. If at that point these bodies feel like they have enough information from the public and with the staff, then we may entertain a motion to close the public hearing. And both boards will do that, both committees will do that. Once the public hearing is closed, if that happens tonight, then the two committees will deliberate. And what usually comes out of this kind of process, these amendments, is that the planning board makes a recommendation to move the amendments forward to the city council. The planning board does not approve or codify these amendments. It goes on to the city council for that. The Committee on Legislative Matters may decide to do the same thing tonight, or they may withhold their kind of recommendation until further time. Bill or Carolyn, Laura, do you want to add anything there?
There's for purpose of informed consent, folks should know that this is being recorded, so your voice and image will be part of the public record. But if you're concerned about that type of exposure, let's just be forewarned and bail right now would be my recommendation, but at least, or turn off your camera in any event. And George is correct that there will be, if it seems appropriate and the committee is agreed, then and the planning board makes its recommendation, then we actually may take the opportunity to vote on ours as well tonight to see if if these proposed ordinance are worthy to be forwarded to the council, general council, for review, debate, and vote. And we may vote on that at the end of this meeting, but that's not a given, just so you know.
And I'd also just like to ask that the planning board, this is a regular meeting of the planning board, so we do have an application in front of us and some other business. So we can't allow this to go on until the wee hours of the morning. At some point, if we feel it's necessary, we may have to continue the public hearing so that we can attend to those other matters. Okie doke. Well, that being said, there are 10 amendments that we're looking at. I hope the public has found a place to access those on the city's public archives. If not, we'll make sure that you find a place to see those.
George, if I may interrupt, we need to, the legislative matters needs to have the clerk call the roll to make sure that we're all assembled and have a quorum. And Laura, would you be so kind? And you're muted.
Councillor Dwight.
Here.
Councillor Maori.
Here.
Councillor Shara.
Here.
And Councillor Thorpe.
Here.
Thank you very much, George. You may proceed.
Great. All right, well, actually, so we're gonna pass it over to Carolyn Miss, who spent a lot of time on this with Wayne Fiden, working through these. So we'll ask her to give us a little kind of context and background to this process and how it's gonna move forward, hopefully. If you don't mind, Carolyn.
No, of course. That's why we're all here. And just to, I think you, when we get into the public hearing, of course, we do take names and addresses for the record. So when people speak, they would need to provide that. But that's down the road a bit. Let me start by doing a screen share. I have a bit of a presentation to give an overview. So sorry here. So I'm going to share screen. Can everybody see that?
Yep.
Okay. I'm just going to, is that a full screen for everyone?
More or less.
For the
We
most
still-
part?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So the public hearing tonight is to get comment on two-family zoning before both bodies, George, as you had mentioned. And I want to go over sort of the foundation of how we got to where we are today, the interaction between planning and zoning, and sort of starting back before 2000 on the zoning side of the equation. We've had two-family by right in the urban residential B and urban residential C districts, and I'll show a map of that a little bit later, for going back decades. And that's essentially where 60% of the population lives. So that's been by right for a very long time. In around just before 2000, the city council adopted an amendment to allow accessory dwelling units throughout the city, outside of the URB and C districts by special permit. Initially, they were 800 square foot maximum unit size allowed under accessory dwellings. Then detached accessory dwellings were allowed by special permit. Sort of subsequent to that, accessory dwelling units were shifted over to being by right in all areas except for detached accessory dwelling units. And the cap was raised from 800 square feet to 900 square feet. And 2010, the city went through a planning process. Sustainable Northampton was adopted. And on the heels of that sort of policy shift and sort of focus on where the community wanted to go in terms of equity, housing development, economic development, open space, and so forth. On the heels of that, there were some zoning amendments that were passed to be consistent with Sustainable Northampton, and we've continued to do that through the years since 2010-11 timeframe. We've also done other studies since that time that have really focused more on housing and affordable housing and housing needs, barriers to fair housing, and at that same time, we've made tweaks and adjustments to the zoning to try to address some of this new information that's come out of these studies. And where we are now is, we're moving forward with an update of Sustainable Northampton, the Climate Resilience and Regeneration Plan that talks a lot about land use and transportation and equity issues, and also continuing to make those adjustments on the zoning side that would address our housing needs for the city. And then, so further context, this package of two-family by right is sort of part of this, what we're calling 4 components or a quartet of zoning changes that really address what we've heard over the last several years as projects are approved, that we are not meeting affordable housing needs. We are needing more units, more rental units, more homeownership units, units of smaller size. So the two-family by right zoning is one piece of that, which we will be bringing forward to City Council this year and this spring, I think. Another component is the form-based code that we've already had lots of conversation about for downtown Northampton and Florence Center, which expands housing opportunities on the ground floor of buildings within those commercial districts that are outside of the core areas. And the goal for that is really to allow more, again, more sort of multifamily housing where, you know, at the core of our business districts to both help economic revitalization and support business development downtown, but also to meet some of our multifamily housing needs. There's also an affordable housing amendment that's already been introduced to City Council that hasn't been, the public hearing has not been scheduled yet, but that's specifically targeted at easing the permitting process for projects that are creating subsidized long-term permanent sort of affordable housing units in the city. And then finally, the fourth one is one that hasn't been introduced yet, but we're still working out the details, is creating incentives for construction of smaller units. So, you know, this would be under 1,000 square feet. Right now, the working number is 800 square feet, because we've heard from people that there just aren't enough, there's not enough incentive for people to build those smaller units. So we want to sort of crack that open and know that we need to sort of target that size development. So this two-family by right is what we're talking about tonight, but I just wanted to provide that context of the other housing amendment, housing focused amendments that would be coming forward. The goals in this two-family by right zoning are to address zoning caused income and equity disparity. Essentially, you know, the long-standing creation of districts that only allow single-family detached housing has been in place, you know, all around the country since zoning was first initiated. It was a way to sort of separate people who don't have the opportunity to buy or even rent single-family homes. We want to direct housing on existing infrastructure and encourage a variety of housing types to address a variety of income levels, demographic shifts, but at the same time, the components within the proposed zoning try to get at defining the characteristics of neighborhoods and speak to that, so that any new units that do come on board are you know, fit into our historic neighborhoods, and some of which are historic in the sort of capital H sense, but also existing neighborhoods. In terms of process that got us here, we did hire a consulting firm to help us through this sort of creating these design standards and taking a look wholesale across the city to try to come up with a framework to create and allow two-family homes everywhere throughout the city, and not just in the urban residential B and C districts. So Dodson Flinker was hired and analyzed the entire city and where those units exist. They held focus groups with architects, builders, developers, residents of two-family homes, provided a draft zoning to the planning board. The planning board sort of, it was an iterative process back and forth between the planning board and the consultant team. And then in September of last year, the planning board hosted a public forum to talk about the details. And out of that forum, modifications were made based on comments that the planning board received. And then also there was a recommendation out of the Housing Partnership for moving ahead on this provision to open up and allow sort of two families everywhere in the city. So here's the zoning map for the city, and I don't want to spend a lot of detail on this, but I want to just show you the orange sort of darker orange and really dark orange here is URC, and then we have URB. These are the districts where two families are already allowed by right. If you're building more than 2,000 square feet, that currently requires site plan review, but otherwise the use of to create a second unit on a property is allowed currently in those districts. So again, sort of the orange, the darker orange colors. The rest of the city is, so we're going to talk about some of the tweaks that are in the zoning that relate to those areas, but it's really about allowing two families in the remaining portions of the city. So these lighter orangish yellow colors, urban residential A, there's a bit in Florence here, and then out in Leeds, much of the sort of the Leeds core neighborhoods are urban residential A. And then we have rural residential, water supply protection district, and the suburban residential districts that are part of this discussion. And then just sort of further data point that that sort of informs this process is, overall we've over the last 20 years, we've actually lost a net loss in total housing units. We've gained a lot in single family homes. We've lost some two families, but there's the biggest shift sort of was up until 2013, and then since 2013 we've continued to gain units. But if you look at the 20-year span, we've lost units over time. So this isn't about so even adding more opportunity for units isn't it sort of keeps us level with where we are now, or where and potentially brings us closer to where we were even 20 years ago. Just some pictures of sampling of two families around Northampton. The consultants also looked at other cities and concepts for two-family development in other cities. And then, so that brought us to the package of 10 ordinances that you have the city councilors have in front of them tonight. And just to touch on the concepts within each of those, that sort of they work together as a package, even though they're individual ordinances, but we need to change the definition of two families. So I'll go a little bit into that, but just to clarify that it's a shift from accessory dwelling unit is sort of shifting to two families. So we'll be modifying that, essentially eliminating the 900 square foot maximum cap on accessory dwelling units, and just referring to any unit as a unit. So if a single family home owner wants to add a unit, that would be a two family. Creation of design standards for new construction for those units. And then part of the package includes changes to the tables for urban residential A, B, and C, and tweaking of the parking and garage locations. There's been some confusions for the last 7 or 8 years about interpretation of those design characteristics. So this ordinance tries to clarify that. We're also taking the opportunity to do some other cleanups of the tables that are involved. So water supply protection table was never formatted like some of the other residential tables. And number 6, I'm going to get back to. Initially in this package, there was a creation of an incentive for smaller unit size by site plan, but I'll get into this a little bit later. We've one of our planning board members actually discovered a recent case from Eastern Mass that plays into this ordinance that we would recommend the committees to look at more carefully. So the definitions and lot size, two families would occupy just as accessory dwelling units do now. The lot size would be the same in each, not in each district, but within each district. Whatever the lot size requirement is for a single family home would also apply for a two family, but there would be an expansion of footprint or reduction in open space. That is not proposed in this. So there's still the minimum lot area, the minimum open space, frontage, depth, and width still remain the same. building placement and massing and are two elements within the design piece of this that is proposed, that in order to sort of all that work that went into looking at the neighborhoods throughout the city and determining sort of character of those neighborhoods is the basis on which the building placement criteria in the design standards has been created. We currently require covered front entries for residential units. That would carry over also with two families. And then there's just some additional massing criteria that describes what happens when you're adding two different sized buildings and how you offset those to sort of break up a large expanse of wall. Other elements in the zoning include, as I mentioned, parking and garage location, not just for two families in the UR A, B, and C district, but it's really only applicable for two families in the outlying districts. Character requirements related to dispersing parking. And I'll also say that the parking requirements are not changing. So we currently have a minimum parking requirement based on the number of units on a property. That's not being proposed to be changed. There's a screening component of the project or this zoning that addresses a comment that we heard, a concern about tree cutting for new construction. So screening requires replacement of trees. If you're going to build a two-family and it requires taking down a tree larger than 3 inches in caliper, then an applicant would be required to plant replacement trees on the property. And whoops, sorry. And then there is a provision, and this is one of the things I want to talk about in my next slide, is a requirement that any of these two-family unit construction be fossil fuel free for the heating systems. So what that means is no gas or propane furnaces, that everything would be electric or heat pump and electric combination for heating systems. This is important as we move forward, and it ties into sort of the stronger goals, statements coming out of the climate resilience and regeneration plan. And the reason why I want to highlight that here is that there's sort of a fine line that zoning can walk with respect to items that are covered in the building code. And we have David Whitehill on the planning board actually sent me notice that there was a very similar requirement in the town of Brookline's ordinance or bylaw that required fossil fuel free systems for any building. And the Attorney General said that was crossing the line, essentially going into too many other codes that dictate how systems are permitted. And so what that does, I think, and this is sort of late breaking news, so what that does, I think, for us is sort of think about how we can modify this zoning package to still keep that important piece in for making sure that that new construction going forward does include fossil fuel free heating systems. So my recommendation would be that instead of allowing two families by right in the outlying districts, that we actually allow everything by site plan approval, because under site plan, then the planning board has we feel that there's more ability to create additional requirements that might ordinarily by right project be overstepping into sort of other codes. So that's one thing that, I think is important to talk about tonight. And we also got comments about confusion about parking requirements. And so I would suggest that we look at clarifying that section 8.8D2 and clarify that parking that it be clarified that parking shouldn't be allowed between houses and streets except for one space, but to the side, that would be that's sort of the goal of that language. So we could probably clarify that. And another question that came up was related to the build to zone and how that affects existing homes that don't currently meet the build to requirement in the design standards. And so I think it does make sense to sort of allow a project to move forward even if the existing conditions don't meet the build to requirements, because we do have many instances where buildings aren't close up to the street in the URA, B and C districts. And then number 4 that I have on the screen here, this actually I would delete now, so I don't want to talk about that now because of the conversation I just had under item 1 about potentially moving all 2 families to site plan review. And that also addresses item 5. So that's the end of my presentation. I wanted to keep it at more of a conceptual level because I know there are probably lots of questions that people have, and I'd be happy to, go through details of the ordinance as questions come up from the committee and the board and the public. George, you're muted.
Thank you very much, Carolyn. That was a nice slide presentation. Good context for all of us, I think. And for probably some folks in the public, it may be the first time they're seeing the complexity of these zoning amendments. So I'm a little betwixt and between here. We have so many members of the public who certainly want to chime in and with some of their own information and questions. But I know that the members of the planning board and the legislative matters may also have some concerns. So perhaps a little compromise is to ask the legislative matters if there are any items that they want to prioritize that we could discuss tonight or in future discussions before we move into the public hearing, rather than going through each one of the 10 amendments at this point. Or Bill and others, planning board members, would you prefer that we just dive into the amendments and have all of our questions on the table for Carolyn at this point?
I would ask the Legislative Matters Committee, what's your pleasure?
I mean, I'd be happy to do either. I think that there's, obviously there's some of these that will take more time. So we could prioritize, just go, that would be apparent by the ones that took less time. So we could go through all of them and really dig into the ones that need more attention. But
I think for formality purposes, I think we have to, one, announce the opening of a public hearing if we're going to open this to the public, and then the Legislative Matters has to vote whether to open a public hearing. That's just, those are the protocols for the public hearing, and then we also vote to close it when it seems evident that we've exhausted the public input. So I think ultimately the question would be, do the planning board and the Legislative Matters members want to ask their questions of Carolyn first? Or do we just, I think more appropriately, should we open the public hearing and then proceed with the public's input? And that, those either ors, that's one step forward.
Councillor Dwight, I would recommend letting the public ask their questions because it might limit our questions. Some of those questions might be the same or similar.
Yeah, I
Fair enough.
would agree that we should open the hearing and then, decide whether we need to go through each one by one
Okay.
after we've heard from the public.
Okay, so
Okay.
why don't we do this then? And actually, before I open the public hearing, Caroline, I don't know the process question. Have these proposed changes been vetted in the Energy and Sustainability Committee yet?
So the proposed, so this package of amendments, no, I don't believe they have.
Okay, because that's germane to the stickier questions or the stickier point that you brought up about non-fossil fuel requirements. So, but we'll burn that bridge when we get to it.
I will say, Councillor Dwight, I will say that when we have had this language in proposed in other ordinances, there has been discussion there as well, but this package has not specifically gone.
We
All right,
could
well,
recognize Councilor Jarrett, who perhaps has some information on that item, that question.
And Councilor Maori as well. So why don't we start this? I will accept a motion to open the public hearing.
Move to open the public hearing.
Is there a second? And it's okay. Motion's made by Councilor Shara, seconded by Councilor Thorpe. Any discussion on the motion? Laura, would you call the roll of the legislative matters for purposes of opening this public hearing? Oh, you're muted.
Councillor Dwight,
Yes.
Councillor Maori,
Yes.
Councillor Shara,
Yes.
and Councillor Thorpe.
Yes.
Okay, George, I give the helm back to you.
So this isn't a planning board kind of parliamentary procedure to go through a vote to open a public hearing, but we'll see to that. I think we opened it up just at 7 o'clock. So regarding that last question from Councilor Dwight about the Energy Committee, why don't we turn to Councilor Jarrett, who has some information on that.
Thank you.
Alex?
Yes, so Councilor Maori and I serve on the Energy and Sustainability Commission, and at our December meeting, we voted to endorse this package. I think both for its fossil fuel free section, and then also for its sustainable transportation goals and energy use goals, with two families being more energy conservative than single families.
Great. Thank you very much. So why don't we do this then? Why don't we move forward and open up the comments to the public? The planning board has had an opportunity in the past to spend quite a intensive meeting going through these amendments. So we've had some of our questions added. As Carolyn mentioned, it helped to strengthen and also clarify some of these amendments. So I think we can wait till our turn comes up later on in the evening to ask more questions. So at this point, we'll call people by raising of your hands. Most of you have become pretty Zoom proficient. You can raise your hand as Mr. Ace Taylor has done there in the corner, a yellow hand, or you can do it just on the screen as Mr. Alden Bourne has, or you can also do it in the participant list, okay? And I will try to keep a queue going as I guess we can't do it in the participant list. That's not, so you have to do it either manually like this or with the yellow hand. And I'll keep a queue going, and I ask people to be patient as we try to get to you. And again, when you begin speaking, if you would give your name, your address, and try to limit your comments or questions to about 2 minutes, and Carolyn will try to answer those questions as they come up. So let's stop with Mr. Ace Taylor, and then we'll go to Diane Scott.
Good evening. My name is Ace Taylor, they, them. I live at 14 Fruit Street in Ward 3 of Northampton. I am a homeowner and landlord, but I am here speaking on behalf of the Housing Partnership. I don't have a question, but I wish to give the Housing Partnership support of all of these amendments. We think that this will strongly improve the amount of available housing in Northampton, particularly more affordable housing. It will also simplify, at least to a small extent, the zoning rules and requirements, which we recognize as being a difficulty for potential developers and potential improvements in Northampton. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
George,
Okay.
can I just, so Zoom likes to keep us on our toes. So it seems like people are finding this, but now the raise hand feature is under reactions. So down at the bottom, if you click on reactions, that should give you multiple choices, including raising your hand.
Thank you, Councilor Scarrow.
It's
Okay,
still-
now we're gonna,
it's still under the participant as well, I believe. It is on mine. So maybe there's two options.
Yeah.
Maybe maybe it's different for each.
unfortunately.
Anyway.
Maybe you have an
Oh.
updated Zoom.
So we're gonna go to Diane Scott, and then we'll move over to Alden Byrne. Diane?
Hi, my name's Diane Scott. I live at 44 Landy Avenue in Florence in Bay State. And I have a question about, across the street from us, there's a property that's has been sold, and we don't know how it's going to be developed yet. And we don't know, we haven't seen the plans for that. And I don't believe you have either. But I've one of the things that popped up for me is in the presentation that you gave, you said the character of the neighborhood would be, and then you mentioned something about being historic. So would only the historic nature of a site or a building have anything to do with the character of the neighborhood? Or what other aspects of maintaining the character of a neighborhood would be taken into account with these new zoning amendments?
George, I don't know if you want to have me answer questions as they come up, or
I think so. If you
Okay.
think there, and then we'll, hopefully if another person has that same question, we can move beyond that.
Yeah.
Jan,
Okay. Yep, that sounds good. So it doesn't mean keeping the idea was really to look at what are some of the defining features of Northampton neighborhoods, and particularly in the urban residential A, B, and C districts. B and C, of course, Landy Avenue's in urban residential B, 2 families are already allowed by right there. But it's really about form and location of structures in relationship to the street, creating or requiring covered entries, because that's that's been a characteristic of neighborhoods in throughout the city, is having sort of that transitional space between the street and residential units. And so the idea of having parking set back behind as opposed to front and center with a whole face of a building being a garage, that's not really typical of the way neighborhoods have been developed. So that's one of the design requirements, is relates to parking and putting the parking to the side and to the rear. And if you're going to have an attached garage, that has to be stepped back from the front facade, so that that's not the primary thing that you see along the street front. So features in the design standards of that sort.
Thank you,
Okay.
Carolyn. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Alden Byrne, then Penny, guys.
Yeah, hi there. It's Alden Bourne. I live in Florence on Liberty Street. And my question is, in terms of property owners, who are these changes likely to appeal to, and what are the potential unintended consequences?
The goal of this is not to particularly focus on one group or owner over another. It's really to allow flexibility and opportunities for both existing homeowners who might feel like they need to get some sort of spread the distribution of their financial burden on their property, maybe get some more income to help offset some of that. It also provides opportunity for potentially for rental units for people who can't afford to buy, and then adding a new unit offers an opportunity for someone who might not otherwise be able to move to Northampton, have a place to rent. So it's really sort of covers the spectrum, and it's not meant to target it at one group over another.
Regarding the unintended consequences, I think, Mr. Byrne, that's really hard to say at this point. I think it'll take a little time for this to roll out and see what happens with homeowners and builders. Okay.
So I have three things to say. My name is Penny Geis, and I live at 1 Front Street in Leeds. First, I want to give a thank you to Councillor Maori for letting everyone in Ward 7 know about this, because we are more impacted than any of the other wards. So thank you. Secondly, I want to give a big thank you to Carolyn Mish for answering my questions. I had a number of questions, and as late as 9:30 last night, she was on the job answering questions for me. I really appreciate that. And because of that, my concerns were addressed. I'm more clear about what these things mean. And so my final comment is a thank you to all of you on this committee for thinking about both the environmental and inclusion of other people in our community. So those two are the environmental aspects, and the inclusionary aspects of these are right on target. And I thank you all so much for working on this.
Thank you, Penny. So let's go to Bucky Sparkle and then Bill Ryan.
All right. Hi. Thank you. It's glad to be part of the process here. I did submit a letter, so I'm not going to go into details. I am a homeowner at 87 Grove Avenue in Leeds, and my comments are effectively, when I looked at the bylaw, I saw a lot of what I would call cookie cutter lots, and there are a lot of lots that are rectangular in town, and that makes a lot of sense. Mine is not one of them, even though it's a conforming lot. It's still weirdly shaped with weird site conditions. And of course, there are means to go through special permits, et cetera, for many bylaws. But when I looked at the build to zone, which has some soft wording in it, as well as some of the parking requirements that are just not viable on my site, I understand that it's unlikely to just throw those requirements out. We do want a nice looking municipality and nice neighborhoods. And for typical streets, they make a lot of sense. What I'm hoping is that the city will be able to add some wording into these bylaws that makes it easier for a planning board or potentially a ZBA to allow for modifications from the standard stereotypical parking requirements and screening requirements, which I fully support the requirements. But in the case of my property where I am looking to build a second dwelling on it, and have been since we moved in, I see some strong restrictions, and I'm terrified of having to go through a variance process or have a very high bar and hurdle to get over through the ZBA, or high standards that the planning board must adhere to in order to grant a waiver. So I'm hoping there can be more language added that makes it a little softer, a little easier for permit granting authorities to allow irregularities based on each and every individual lot. Thank you for your time, and good luck with the process.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, Bill Ryan, then Councillor Jarrett. You're muted, Mr. Ryan.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah. Great. My name is Bill Ryan. I live at 129 Warner Street. The last time I came before the planning board was to discuss the project at 170 Federal that I kind of tracked through to see how it came about, such a big project with so little review from the public and from the planning board for that matter. And so that's kind of the model I use of those very large houses that have come into our neighborhood and definitely not consistent with the character of the neighborhood in terms of their size, their mass, their setback. Big houses on very small lots. And so I have two concerns about the pending amendments. One goes to that because now we're looking at even larger homes on two-family homes, which I'm totally in favor of, as long as they're within the kind of the character and scale of the neighborhood that has been talked about. But these aren't. They're going to be very big, almost twice as big as the ones at 170 Federal, for those of you who have taken a look, and in terms of how far back they go. And they're just too big for the neighborhood. We need to find a way to make this zoning, which is really designed for really urban areas, really urban areas that are where everything's close together. And that's not the character of Bay State at all. Historically, it was not developed that way. And any more houses like this and these bigger ones are going to completely change the character of the neighborhood, no doubt about it. So the other point that I'd like to make is I looked at this through the eyes of a developer, and one of the things I noticed was that some of the lots in Bay State are kind of wide, but they're also very deep. And currently, developers can come in, as we've seen in the 170 project, and build right on the frontage, but it's hard to get into the backs of those lots. And what I see, because of the elimination of the detached and attached and detached accessory homes in favor of now being able to have two homes on one lot, and the lots are so narrow that some of those wide and very deep lots are now going to be subdivided by developers into a series of 3 or 4, depending upon the width, maybe 2, 3, 4, depending upon the width on the street, and going way back, maybe 200 feet, in order to get the minimum size lot for each of the two houses. And so what you're going to end up with is you're going to end up with a property that's going to be come in, developer's going to buy it, they're going to knock down the house, knock down all the trees, they're going to subdivide the lots, run them back, and by only site plan review, be able to put two houses in, two big houses along the lines of what we're seeing, because we already know those will fit. And there'll be one in the front, one in the back, one in the front, one in the back, and depending upon how wide it is, one in the front, one in the back. So you can end up with maybe on a 200 foot wide lot that goes back 200 feet, you can end up with 8 houses on that lot, all out of character with the existing houses in the neighborhood, which are much more modest, small scale, were built for the mill workers originally, and have been added to on the years. But it's a small, very small scale, intimate neighborhood in that way. So I'm not against evolution, because it needs to occur, and we have all the requirements that we have for sustainability and everything. It's all good. But I looked at your definition of sustainability that you all use. I finally found in the sustainability plan on the very last page, and the definition is meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So there's two aspects of that. One is meeting the needs of the present, and this zoning, as it's coming through, and this is just an extension of the trend, is not meeting the needs of the present, at least in our neighborhood. Our neighborhood is different than the more urban neighborhoods of Northampton. And what you all are trying to do is turn it into an urban neighborhood, and build is what we're seeing. And I know this is all done for affordable housing and all that stuff, but the affordability of these buildings when they come in is not going to be determined by what we like the cost to be. It's going to be determined by the market. And the market, as we know, is building in our area now. And so all these are going to go in and be built, and they're going to be sold to people with a very high income, and price out as we knock down these houses that are actually affordable. They need some work, and they're going to be replaced by much more expensive houses, is the trend that we're already seeing, because we do have unintended consequences results from the 2018 amendments already that we're seeing. And so those should all really be evaluated and gone through and analyzed to see what's actually working and what's not, in a way that we all work together to preserve the neighborhoods and attain the sustainability goals that we're looking for. So those are my two concerns.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan. Okay, Councilor Jarrett, and then phone number 413-3208.
Great, thank you, George. I also have some questions similar to Bill's, but I'll ask them and then at the end here. So yeah, I wanted to speak primarily in support of this ordinance. I talked about how it uses less resources to construct two families, and generally two-family development is more affordable. But specifically how it's in line with the goals of the Sustainable Northampton Plan. I think in the urban residential areas, it promotes building more units in a walkable, bikeable area that's close to public transit. It minimizes tree loss compared to the traditional suburban development. I think, it's really not easy to see any green space in our in-town neighborhoods replaced with new houses. But it makes so much more sense than suburban development that cuts acres of trees or covers farmland, fragments habitat, and is completely car dependent. And our zoning has been designed now to preserve the natural and agricultural areas that are further out. And in all areas, this package would take advantage of the existing infrastructure. So also with cost, there's so adding a unit to a single family is a less expensive development process because the land cost is already paid and the existing utility connections can be used. There are builders who will build a backyard cottage at prices that will actually meet the definition of truly affordable, certainly in the workforce housing range, and both of which are sorely lacking. And then there is great demand for properties here, and that is driving up prices. If we don't end up increasing supply, then we're just going to see the prices continue to rise. As far as I think we aren't going to like all the buildings that get built. I certainly support more work on design standards, encouragement of the smaller unit sizes. I think as a community, we can be proactive about encouraging the kind of development that we want. And for an individual to decide to build that second unit and to rent it out at an affordable price can make a huge difference in someone's life in Northampton. A couple of concerns. 3,400 square feet is a large two-family. There are 888 two-families in Northampton, and 17% of the two families are larger than 3,000 square feet. I would say in my ward, including Bay State, most are not that large. And the average two-family is 2,500 square feet. I know that bigger units are certainly in demand now, but I would suggest considering the smaller threshold before site plan review. Just, the current threshold is 2,000 square feet. So looking at what 3,000 or square feet would look like for that. Although it sounds like we might be switching everything to site plan review. So maybe that's out. Also the significant tree ordinance, which site plan review triggers. There is a provision for the screenings in the screening section that, as Carolyn talked about, with the replacement trees. But that's no matter what size tree you cut, you're going to replace it with a 1-inch tree. And there's a big difference between cutting a 20-inch tree and a 3-inch. So you might want to consider a more nuanced approach there. And then what Bill brought up about the lot depth, my question there is that, some lots are very deep, and is there any restriction on how deep in a lot a detached second unit can be built? Or can you just run, a driveway all the way to the very back if you want? So thank you.
Thank you, Alex.
So I can answer the question about the depth. I guess first say that you can't divide a lot into a separate parcel unless you meet the minimum frontage requirement. And what's proposed is there are no changes to frontage requirements. And you need to have a frontage and width to the back of any structure proposed. So this package would not alter the existing requirements for that. But there isn't a limit on where on a property someone could get could put a second unit. A detached unit would trigger site plan review as it's already drafted in this proposed ordinance. And at that point, the board would look at, screening, particularly for headlights and parking location, and so forth. And the site, the size could be any size, just as, anyone, for single family homes, anyone can build any size single family home that they desired at this point. And certainly as it relates to Bay State Urban Residential B district, you could build a 2-family of any size that does trigger site plan review, but the planning board doesn't currently have the jurisdiction to say, no, it's too big, you can't build that. And then just to sort of get back to that 3,400 square foot threshold, yes, I think that's what I would suggest that we get into a little bit more detail later about sort of striking that and making everything above 2,000 square feet trigger site plan review, because of the fact that we want to make sure that we're pushing ourselves as a community to be fossil fuel free. So I think it's important to maintain that element and to do that within the bounds of our current interpretation of other state statutes. So I guess I would say that that's consistent. That idea of switching to 2,000 square feet or maintaining 2,000 square feet as the threshold for site plan is consistent with what you were asking about.
Thank you. All right. Phone number 3208, and then Ellen Coteen.
This is Johnny Scarborough, Garfield Street, Florence. And I do have a couple of people have mentioned the clear cutting of the lots. That was one of my big concerns, in the size of the trees. There is one going across the street from my house that is probably a 100-year-old spruce tree that will probably be coming down, along with a couple of other maple trees. Big concern there for me. Sewer and water line issues, given the older neighborhoods. When you put in all of these housings, what is that going to do? I know that my area has had numerous call outs to the city and water department. The other concern that I would have is in regards to the runoff waters on all of these. Are there going to be on-site dry wells? And the last issue basically is the fire issues. Now that you've got these homes that are attached, are we going to have more fires, or is there going to be some sort of fire suppression system for both of the apartments, like you would have for both of the houses, like you would have in an apartment complex? And the last thing is just the loss of the unique neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. And I'm sure we'll try to address those in the evening. Some of those, certainly the fire suppressant, are within the building codes. I'm not sure if our 2 families, trigger that kind. Carolyn, do you have anything to say about fire suppressant systems or dry wells?
Sure. So fire suppression this is not my area of expertise, but I do know that fire suppression is triggered with a new 3 unit. So if they're in the same building, not in detached, but that's totally a fire code and building code issue. In terms of dry wells don't work everywhere. It really depends on the soils and what the conditions are. So we certainly couldn't write into zoning that a dry well has to be installed with the new 2-family. What happens when you do a site plan review, the board looks at drainage, you're not required to submit a drainage calculation, but the issue really is more about maintaining drainage on your property and not shedding it or directing it off-site to another property. So that is, that would be the case, but there wouldn't be necessarily any particular requirements that a stormwater system be designed for a two-family.
So they're talking nothing for infrastructure.
Sorry,
If-
Councilor
I just-
Dwight.
Just want to add to that, of course, there are built-in incentives with the the euphemistically called rain tax. You can actually get discounts if you are able to essentially maintain and corral any watershed, any water that doesn't that will not introduce itself into the storm drain system, so that there are offsets, so that there's a carrot less a stick
So were they,
that's provided.
I unmuted it. Didn't say anything.
Okey doke. So thank you very much. Let's go over to Ellen Coteen and then Deborah Berkovitz.
Hi, I'm Ellen Coteen on Sylvester Road in Florence. Can you hear me?
Uh-huh.
Okay. A lot of the way you're trying to solve this zoning change is by the affordability aspect of it. And there's been no discussion at all of any financial restrictions that will be put on the two-family units. And two-family home in and of itself does not make it affordable. It's possible to build very high-priced two-family homes. So unless there's some kind of tie-in to the area-wide median income or some restrictions put on what the rental cost is, or the cost of the new building is, I think selling it as a way of achieving more affordability is fallacious.
Thank you.
Is there any way of addressing my concern?
I can certainly speak to that. I mean, the intention of the ordinance isn't to say these are all going to be affordable units. The goals for the city are to create opportunities for housing at all different levels. And so, yes, some housing will be targeted, will be higher end housing. Other housing will be more modest, or what we call sort of market rate affordable, I think the sort of as a package, as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, we are looking at affordable housing specific zoning that really would have the restrictions about deed restrictions for affordability. But that's one component to bring to the table, along with other measures that we feel that providing opportunities for different size housing, different types of housing will make opportunities for people at various income levels. And so we want to make sure that that is out there.
I don't know what that's based on. I mean, the builders and developers, for the most part, are going to want to maximize their profits. I mean, that's the way it is. So creating the opportunity does not necessarily mean someone's going to take advantage of that opportunity to create affordable housing.
Well, for just to clarify, for example, we've had many units created as accessory dwelling units for people who wanted to provide opportunities for initially family members, but then that's not required to have a family member live in an accessory dwelling unit. So for example, on Sylvester Road, in that portion of the city, there are properties where there are accessory dwelling units that exist today. Those, by their size and the fact that a homeowner decided to hire a builder to build their unit for them. They still wanted to live there, but it opens up another rental option for both the homeowner to get some income, but also for a renter who may not be able to break into the market so quickly. So there are different ways that these second units could be built. It's not all about, so many times it is about individuals who opt to add a second unit to their existing property.
Okay, thank you, Carolyn. Thank you, Alan. So Deborah Berkowitz, and then we'll go to Amanda Turk.
Hi. I feel heartbroken right now because I loved Carolyn's presentation, and I cannot believe that in my long history in Northampton, I am finding myself opposing what looks so good, and I don't buy it for 1 second. I don't think it's going to turn out that way. And that's because I heard the same thing about Hospital Hill. I heard it was going to lead to mixed use development, more affordable housing, walkability. I heard the same thing about the infill zoning changes, and we're looking at outrageous development by John Hansel across the city. And I want to make note that as a developer, he's on this call because I believe that this is going to be a great financial boon to developers. They're really the ones who are going to benefit here. So I feel really sad because I want more two-family housing. I want more affordable housing. I want more walkability. And I don't think that that's where this is going to lead us to. So having said that, I believe that you believe it, but I don't think it's going to happen. So I want to give some suggestions of things that you could do. Some you couldn't do, but I'll just say them. One is that Wayne Fiden was referenced today in the Gazette saying that this change should increase the rental stock. So I say don't just hope that it will. If what you aspire to is more rental units, put that in the zoning changes so that one of the 2 units must be a rental, period. Or if there are 2 separate buildings on the property, one of them must remain a rental unit in perpetuity. Or incentivize the rental unit with a lower tax rate. I'm a landlord, and I can tell you in Northampton that the property taxes and the cost of housing makes the economics for being a landlord for promoting rentals not very positive. And I would say continue having a different 2-family requirement for owner-occupied properties, because homeowners generally generally make different choices around development for their properties. They're typically more accountable to neighbors, and they're more responsible with maintenance of their properties. And what you might end up finding in a decade is a city of absentee landlords with everything that brings with it. Looking at lot sizes, I think the city has not been transparent enough in terms of providing maps for us to look at what full build outs look like with both the infill zoning changes and these changes. So I'd like to see what every neighborhood looks like when you can have 2 families, when you can have the changes in the lot size. My city councilor pointed out a couple houses on Riverside Drive and said, look, this is such a beautiful example of what could happen. That lot size was 5 times the size of the minimum lot size that's here. And I personally think that a 3,750 square foot lot size for 2-family just is a kind of urban density that we do not have yet here. I would suggest thinking about having more nuanced zoning within, like, let's say URB, because downtown Northampton or downtown Florence is very different from Bay State. And what we're having is really dramatic changes very quickly that don't actually recognize the character and the function of the neighborhood. And maybe revisiting those every 5 years and looking at the positive and negative development, what's happened due to zoning changes. I would say with a big request, don't allow this on contiguous lots that have been subdivided from a larger lot. It will be a subdivision workaround used by developers. And I look at 170 Federal Street, which the building inspector referred to as a compound, even though they were single family, the developer managed to make them into single family lots. And if you then have those single family lots with what are not minor tweaks to our 2-family by right, these are very big changes in terms of size and not having homeowner requirements. It's a huge change in what could have happened at that property, which I'm sure is hoping to be, ahead for the next ones. And then having, repositioning a garage to me is not the kind of design standard that we really need to be able to be accounting for neighborhoods. So I would say having more meaningful design standards. And then I want to say this most importantly, to go slow and to make sure that what you want to have happen happens. So if you institute these changes, do it with a sunset clause, maybe 12 to 24 months, and then reevaluate it. And this, I think, should also be done with the infill zoning because we're seeing problematic outcomes, and you're responsible for massive changes to the city that can't be undone. These changes should be continuously evaluated on a mandated schedule embedded in the zoning legislation, and then the maintenance of the regulations weighed according to the initial goals of the changes and be explicit and transparent. So if you want 75% of all new family properties to be rentals, that's aspirational, and you find that you get 25%, then something needs to be changed. Or if you want 50% of the two-family houses built to be cost under $250,000 or $350,000 and 10% end up being so, reevaluate and revise. And then I would say, don't let people who purchase properties in that 12 to 24 month period be able to make use of the changes if you decide that they won't working. Because what I think we're going to find here is a even greater bidding wars that tip in the scales of deep-pocketed developers, because there is tremendous additional financial incentive with these zoning changes. It makes every property that much more lucrative, and it's not going to be lucrative to put on some rental units that are going to be, $1,200 a month rentals. So I'd say be visionary, be responsive, be measured, be accountable, or your legacy will be one that is predictable and likely one that is far from what you're hoping it's going to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. Okay, Amanda, and then Magali was here but may have gone.
Hey everyone, I'm Amanda Turk. I'm on Summer Street. I've been downtown for about 22 years. I know the neighborhoods very well, and I just wanted to second that that those properties that are not typical, not your average looking rectangular property, that they maybe don't have, that maybe the text can be changed with the bylaws that allow those unusual, atypical lots to get approval without requiring a variance or a ZBA application. Thank you for all your hard work. Really appreciate all of you.
Thank you, Amanda. And Magali.
Hi, good evening. To be honest with you, when I first raised my hand, I had.
Excuse me 1 minute. Could you give us your address, please?
Oh, sure. Live on Dickinson Street off of North Elm Street, Ward 1B. Just wanted to say that I echo a lot of the comments that Bill Ryan said in the beginning. Concerns about, how big houses changing the character of the neighborhoods. And I think a bunch of folks have said that. And then also with the water and sewer system, just wondering, has there been any, and maybe you guys have said this, I did come a little bit late to the meeting, about 10 minutes late. Has there been any update to the water and sewer plan? I know we just passed, a lot of taxes and upgrades to that system, but I'm wondering if this has been folded in, this idea of this plan, building in more units, been folded back into that, and can that system actually sustain that? Are we going to have to have rate increases again in another year or two because we're suddenly building a bunch of these units? So I'm wondering if someone can answer that. And then just thank you to Ms. Berkowitz. I just completely wholeheartedly co-sign on everything she just said. So thank you. That's all I had.
Thank you. Just regarding the the infrastructure, the capacity, I know the planning board had a meeting with the DPW directors a couple of months ago, and we talked specifically about the what we're loosely terming the infill zoning and the infill expansion downtown and in certain areas. And they at this point don't have any concern about the robustness of the system. They believe that they can handle it. They didn't give us any date or any kind of quantity, but that isn't a concern of theirs at this point. Certainly some areas of the city have an older infrastructure, especially when it comes to stormwater systems. And they are planning on doing some work in the downtown area, especially on Main Street. But in terms of the residential infrastructure, they seem to be pretty confident that residential increases aren't going to tax the system.
And George, if I could just add, where we have water and sewer, we also currently allow, and even where we have private systems, we allow accessory dwelling units. So a second unit is already allowed throughout the whole city, certainly in the A, B, and C districts where there's water and sewer. Second units are allowed by right as well. So that's not really a change to those areas. In the outlying areas where we're suggesting new units, there's significant portion of rural residential, water supply protection, and suburban residential are on private systems.
Thank you. Okay, let's move over to Rue Walther and then David Murphy.
So Rue Walther, I live at 16 Warner Street. I am the abutter to what is referred to as the 170 Federal, but it goes up Warner Street. And I would just like to offer a cautionary tale. I'm really piggybacking on everything Deborah said. And so I therefore don't need to, hang on, apologize. I have background noise here. I would like to let the people that live on these other neighborhoods, these other areas that are looking at this situation and thinking, oh, I'm putting my trust in all of these rules and regulations that I'm hearing, because I did that. And I'd like you to drive up 16 Warner right now. And I'd like you up the street, and I'd like you to look at my little red house that's about 1,000 square feet. And I'd like you to see now what's next door to me. Definitely not affordable housing. It'll probably be anywhere from $650,000 to $700,000, $800,000 homes. I'm not upset about the price of the home per se, but what I'm upset about is that I put my trust in a zoning committee. I assume that when you're hearing them say people have to present present what they're doing and we'll vote on it. I am telling you that from my experience, be careful, because there is not a lot of oversight. It appears to me at this juncture that pretty much anything goes, and the more taxes that will be able to be created by the structure, the happier the city of Northampton will be. So again, I offer a cautionary tale. I would suggest getting in touch with Deborah. Deborah, I hate to put that out there, but everything she said, if you don't remember what she said, contact her and pay attention.
Thank you very much. Mr. Murphy.
Good evening, David Murphy, North Elm Street, Northampton. I've got a question for Carolyn. I noticed that the water supply watershed protection overlay is going to change a lot with this. Could you elaborate on that?
So you mean the zoning, the ordinance itself, the water supply protection ordinance? Yes. So the current, it's in a different format. That's for one thing. So basically the biggest change is just bringing over and converting the existing table for water supply protection to the format that matches what we've been doing over the last couple of years for all the other residential districts, so that it has the same sort of look and feel of the other districts. That's really the biggest change, and also just to help clarify through graphics what we're talking about in terms of flag lots and lot layouts and things like that. You'll notice in the ordinance amendment in the water supply protection table that there are some items in red. Those are the text changes from the existing water supply table that are being proposed to be modified in this rollover to the new format.
Mm-hmm. You know, and that's all really, really technical, but let's take a practical application. A whole bunch of URA off Ryan Road, between Ryan Road and Birdsville Road in Ward 6, is covered with a water supply protection overlay. What's going to happen there? Those are all single family houses because they're URA and there's been no change made yet. What's going to happen with those? Are they going to be able to do this, or is this going to block them out? Because you were technically correct in what you said, but nobody's going to understand that owns a house up there. What's it going to be like on the ground for them?
So we did get rid of the overlay. So water supply protection is the zoning district. So in the water supply protection district for single family homes right now, a single family homeowner could have an accessory dwelling unit. It's just capped at 900 square feet. So if a single family, and they are bound by the 65% open space minimums. And so that would still hold even with a smaller two-family, or something that's bigger than 900 square feet. So the change really would be just essentially expanding the cap. So if someone wanted to do something more than 900 square feet, they now would be able to do that. They'd still need to meet the open space and the parking and the setbacks.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the prohibition that came with the district originally is not really there anymore relative
Oh,
to.
it's still there, but it's built into the open space, minimum open space requirement.
The higher threshold.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I've heard a lot, particularly around Village Hill, of the undefined concept of workforce housing. You know, it means different things to different people. It's been thrown around a lot. And on Village Hill, I know I've sold some things up there. I sold a 1-bedroom condo that was above the average value of a single family house in Northampton. Most of the stuff has been $500,000, $600,000, up to $900,000. I think we really need to define workforce housing because people throw that term around. But what is it? We got to define that somewhere as to what that means, because it's really expensive for new construction on Village Hill. It's above the average value of a house in Northampton, and that doesn't seem to me like workforce housing. The other thing is, in the beginning of this, you mentioned that the Attorney General had made a ruling relative to the fossil fuel portion of this ordinance. And I have for ages talked about the fact that it's really hard to have a public hearing on something where a component of it is still in flux and no decision has been made as to which direction we're going in. It would seem to me to be really hard to move forward with a package when with one of the elements of it, there's no decision to be made exactly how legal it is or how illegal it is or isn't relative to a decision the Attorney General's recently made. So I would encourage you all to wait and determine exactly, what the impact is going to be of the Attorney General's ruling relative to where the ability to decide what a heating system is going to be. Is it in a building code? Is it in zoning? Where is it? But it would be really hard to move forward with this without actually having to answer that question and being able to decide, can we do it or can't we do it, or how do we have to do it? So thank you. And I'm glad this is a discussion that's needed to be had for a long time. And I'm glad to see so many people online tonight that want to comment about this, because it's definitely going to have an impact on things on the ground in the neighborhoods in Northampton. It has the potential to be really beneficial and create a lot more housing units. It also has the opportunity to be disruptive to the neighborhoods. And a lot of what people are talking about with the cost of this housing, and a lot of the reason many of these builders are creating as large and expensive a property as they can create is stretch code. We decided some time ago we wanted the stretch code, and that makes the cost per square foot of building things kind of expensive. And it's where we want to go. It's what we want to be as a community. We want to be energy efficient, but there's a cost related to that. And that makes the cost per square foot of these things more expensive, which basically incentivizes contractors to build something as big as they can, as expensive as they can, to try and recoup the cost of the energy efficiency built into the stretch code and the building code. So thank you very much. And I'm glad we're having this discussion, and encourage the planning board to keep up the good work.
Thank you.
So George, if I could just comment on the question about the an Attorney General's ruling in another community. It's not anything that's pending for Northampton. The city solicitor did review this package and didn't have an issue with it. We're just recommending to move forward in a more cautious way. This has come up with solar installation requirements where the zoning can't dictate for by right uses that solar be installed. However, we do have in the zoning that anything that triggers site plan or special permit must be solar ready, which has, and that's sort of the careful route that we've not had challenges on. And so that's why we're suggesting just being a little bit more careful, since this is, something new that's come up.
Thank you. Excuse me. Emma L. has been waiting out there for a while, and after Emma, we'll go to Rajesh Lazaro.
Thank you. I am Milton Hansel. Emma and I live at 277 Riverside Drive in Florence, in the Bay State. I want to thank, one of the people I wanted to thank really early is Bill Ryan, who lives on Warner Street. And anybody who lives on Warner Street and isn't just fit to be tied about what's happened there, is to be commended for self-restraint. I don't mean anything against Rue, who lives next door, but that is not at all consistent with the character of the neighborhood. It is consistent with what we call unintended consequences. I've lived in town for 30 years and I've seen a lot of good intentions go awry. And I applaud the hard work and the good intentions of the planning board that is bringing this to us, but it does not look ready for the real world yet. We need to do a better job of anticipating what profit and market-driven forces will do to a well-intentioned zoning bylaw. And it's something I keep trying to trust my town, and I'm way too passive a resident here to throw stones at a lot of volunteers and very hardworking people. But it gets hard sometimes. Yes, Hospital Hill, and this most recent thing that is in my neighborhood that is having unintended consequences. Before you want to loosen even more restraints on developers, I think we need to know that you can clean up the messes that we already have from some of the stuff that has already passed. So before we give you the keys to the car, we want to remind you, you crashed the last two. Maybe that's pretty extreme, but I'm sorry. It's just a thing that goes on a little bit. And so I'm having a hard time trusting my town to loosen restraints and restrictions on developers. I don't know if I'm missing something. I haven't read the fine tuning on open space preservation, but and I understand the sort of intuitive sense that if you build more in town, you won't have to build as much out of town. Maybe there's some documentation of how that's true, but when we have a seemingly unlimited supply of urban money from Boston or New York City, or there are a lot of people that make a lot more money than me, and they can move into this town. And it doesn't matter if we build 200 or 500 units in town. I don't see how that is going to reduce the stress that the market imposes on open space. I may fully misunderstand that point, and I would request clarification on that. And the other thing that I have that could be called a question is, can we restrict when we're making a relaxation more 2 units? Can we say that's for homeowners that have lived there 5 years and not for developers that moved in real quick? They're going to do their thing and then leave. I think we need less development by right to respond to somebody else, and not more development by right. And probably I don't understand how expensive or inconvenient it is to do more site reviews. Those are my comments. I want to thank everybody involved in this.
Thank you. Carolyn, do you want to try any one of those? The in-town versus development outside in the more rural areas?
I'm not sure exactly what the question was about. I think the idea from, going back to before 2010 was, and it was not to expand infrastructure to the outlying areas, create opportunities for people where they can walk or bike and not have to get in their car for every single trip that they make. That's not to say that we're anticipating that people will stop having cars. That's not what this is about. It's about reducing our carbon footprint. So to the extent, and we know there's housing demand, we know that people are moving to other communities and then driving into Northampton for all their goods and services because they can't afford to live in Northampton. So that further exacerbates the traffic issues, congestion, and of course, air quality and impacts are certainly our goals for trying to address the needs for the housing needs for people. We certainly cannot say that one person is worthy of having a unit and someone else is not arbitrarily. I mean, that's sort of how zoning started to begin with, that certain people were allowed to build and others were not. And so we're trying to, erase that history of exclusion.
Excuse me, I'm trying to make the distinction between homeowners and builders here. And maybe there's no way to do that without being discriminatory in a very non-PC fashion. But I'm hoping there is.
For my part, I am doubtful if that is the case. I think it's probably brings up significant equal protection, frankly, constitutional issues if we were to apply some sort of standard that prevented property owners from something based on anything other than a sort of a to go back to my administrative law days, a rational or just a rational basis that's not, and I don't think I'm opining here, and so certainly please don't quote my legal advice, but I think that would not pass muster on a lot of levels were we to impose some sort of standard based on how long a person is on the home. I'd also suggest that even if it were possible, it seems very likely that that would have a disparate impact on minorities and younger people, and a barrier for entry to the market as homeowners, and in turn create a barrier to entry, to the creation of units that could be good rental properties. So I would just put that out there. I think it would be difficult, if not legally impossible, to put to base it on length of time somebody owned the property.
Zoning and land use regulations are based on land, and so if you, as Marissa said, everybody has to be treated equally. So it's the property, it's how the property is used, and that's what these regulations look at. It's not who uses them, it's what they're used for. And developers are often the ones, builders, developers, whatever you want to call them, they're the ones with the capacity to build the units that serve people who can't otherwise come into the community, as again, Marissa noted. So they are part of our community. They're a part of the solution to providing housing options for all of us as residents in the community.
So we have the classification of owner occupied, which has withstood legal tests in this state, at least. I understand that further restrictions are crazy. And I think I understand from Carolyn that perhaps they're not even desired. I'm gonna mute forever now.
Thank you. Let's move over to Ray Jace.
Thank you very much. I'll be very brief. It's very late. I am very thankful for this debate. Please, let's keep having them. I just want to express, I am Reyes Lázaro. I live in 172 Federal Street on Bay State. I just want to express my deepest support to what Deborah Berkovich, Rue, and other people from Bay State have expressed. I think they are very profound comments that have to do with good development. Please, we are not just people who do not want changes, not in the least. We are proposing profound, good changes. Please listen to us. I know you will. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the public who'd like to speak before we move it over to the committee members?
George, there are people raising their actual physical hands, so you might have to see them.
I see it, Joyce.
You might have to scroll, yeah.
Yeah, I see it, Joyce. I've been doing that a little bit, but the timing doesn't work out. Is there anyone else besides Joyce, while we're queuing up here, who would like to raise their hand? I see a Holly and I see a Catherine. Okay. Joyce, Holly, and Catherine.
Thank you, George. Thank you. And thank you for the opportunity to have this debate. I needed something that would give me some hope in these very dark days that we've been living. And this kind of debate gives me hope. I want to thank everyone for their hard work, and I want to thank you for listening. And just by way of clarifying this for myself, I'm going to say some things that I hear so many people being passionate about. And one of them is our fears for the loss of our unique neighborhoods. All of our neighborhoods are unique. None of us is downtown Northampton. None of us is Florence. None of us is Bay State. So I hear that concern for the loss of our unique neighborhoods, which is a loss of our own unique place in a community. I wonder if there could be, someone talked about percentages of affordable housing and definitions of that, and required for each community. So it's not just whoever might do it, but that in fact, a certain amount of affordable housing is expected. And then also I hear that we're concerned about more rigorous design standards, that the design standards help us maintain the character of our neighborhoods. Not that every house should be the same style, but have the same spirit of the ethos and the culture of each of our unique neighborhoods. We love our neighborhoods. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joyce. How about let's hear from Holly and then Catherine.
Hi, I'm Holly Quigley and Michael Quigley. We live at 139 Riverside Drive. So I also see the back end of that interesting development that is next to, I guess, Rue's house. I do want to say I probably can't speak as eloquently as Deborah, Bill, Rue, et cetera, the people, but I do want to say listening to both sides and listening to the changes, I also believe that you are looking out for the neighborhood or the best of all our neighborhoods in Northampton to bring us forward. But I do think we are a little bit short-sighted in what you are allowing and expanding. That a couple of comments I was writing down a lot as Carolyn was speaking, et cetera. And I was hearing two different things sometimes being said. Affordable housing, and that's not affordable. I heard what she said. It's not going to be all affordable. I do remember the state hospital grounds and what that was supposed to be affordable housing. And again, that was well beyond mine. I could not come into this town now and afford this low income housing because it's way out of my reach also. I mean, I'm proposing, look at this empty factory on Federal Street. If there's any builders, contractors, why don't you take a look at that and utilize that as some wonderful affordable housing with wonderful parking across the street. Maybe we can start looking and kind of directing people in different areas instead of taking the green space behind people's houses. I understand, well, we need it to sustain and keep us here, but maybe that's what's wrong. The taxes, I mean, I know are going to go up. There's no way. This infrastructure that you're talking about, the Public Works Department talking about, that I think we can handle it. Didn't they, at the bottom of Riverside Drive, where Greg's gas station is, or whatever that is now, that was fixed to take care of that drainage going into the pond in Federal, which still floods when we have a huge storm and it's all backed up. So I'm not sure that drainage was fixed. So I'm not quite sure I believe in some of the things that are being said. So I do want to support these people who are saying, hey, step back before you really go forward. Because like I think somebody said, once you go forward, that's it. You know, the wetlands behind my house and my neighbor's house going up, there's a stream going there. are you gonna do your site thing and say, that's okay? I heard Carolyn say, we'll look at these things because we don't want it dumping on others people's properties. But those sometimes you don't see right away. So please step back and look at this as a whole picture, not just building these wonderful houses, which believe me, I would love to have. So thank you. And again, thank you for your work. I mean, this is hard work that you are doing. So I do appreciate it. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Catherine, are you still out there?
Yes, I am. Be brief. Sounds like everyone's ready to be done. I'm Catherine Comadar. I live at 129 Warner Street in Bay State. And I just wanted to respond to the character of the neighborhood discussion a little bit further. Again, I, as many folks have expressed, am also interested in making a more inclusive neighborhood and one with more affordable housing in it, and in coming up with a creative plan to help steward our land here into the future in a way that we can all sustain. But I don't believe that offering up Bay State as a sacrificial lamb is going to fix the ills of the climate crisis. I feel like this is what's happening with the amount of density that's being proposed here and the amount of changes in the size of the buildings, that you're offering this neighborhood up as a sacrificial lamb to try to cure the ills of the climate crisis and the socioeconomic inequality in our world. And I don't believe that the big system can be fixed by annihilating the small system that we have here. This neighborhood we have in Bay State is a treasure. It's a treasure. If you walk through our village now, you see large half-acre or more lots, and abundance of woodland and open space, gardens, and a preponderance of small and moderately sized houses spaced generously apart, and a neighborhood of residents that live here in part because we value this smaller human footprint on our earth. We and many of our neighbors grow small to significant portions of our fruit and vegetables on our land here, providing us with local and affordable food. We and many of our neighbors have small to significant woodlands on our land, providing cooling summer shade, carbon sequestration, pervious surfaces for rainwater catchment, and wildlife habitats and corridors. We and many of our neighbors have planted native trees, shrubs, and flowers, which will have resiliency in the climate crisis and will encourage pollinators and wildlife at risk. The new zoning ordinance placed Bay State Village in what's called Urban Residential District B. This designation seals the fate of Bay State as just that, a place with as many people packed in as possible. A lot that formerly supported one moderately sized house now is an open invitation to a developer to build 3 or 4 large houses with nothing but a little ornamental grass in between. The more we build and pave, the more disconnected we come from the earth. The more disconnected we become from the earth, the less we value the earth, and the more we are willing to build and pave, air condition, use pesticides, and drive, and wonder why we're so hungry for feeling alive. What kind of Northampton are we creating by doing that kind of building? Who will want to live here? So you have said many times that you do hear that residents are concerned about the character of their neighborhoods. And I'm really glad that you're listening to all of us tonight, and I'm glad to be listening to all of you. But I hope that you also can respond to what we're saying and that we can work together, because we all want to grow Northampton in a way that can benefit the world in the future. We all want that, I think. But we don't want to do it at the expense of all the things that we treasure here now. So I hope that this can open a dialogue for something that isn't destroying what we have, but can build on the good that we have here. Thanks.
Thank you, Catherine. Okay, we'll go to Terry's iPad. And then perhaps Ellen Coteen's Zoom mate there who hasn't spoken yet. Terry, are you there? Okay, while we're waiting for Terry to connect back with us, why don't we go to Ellen Coteen and then over to Emil? Diane?
Hi, I'm Diane Palladino, and I live on Sylvester Road. And Sylvester Road is probably the most rural road in Northampton. And Carolyn mentioned that there are many people who have two-family houses. I don't know how many that is. The road is not that long. It's about a mile long. And we may have a few houses that were built as two-family houses. I haven't seen any from the road that look like that. But that's not my point. My point is it's a rural road. People are very much investing in turning some of their own property, and we are thinking of that too, to address wildlife corridors, to connect to other green space. Having a developer come in, and it's interesting, 2 lots just sold recently, and it'll be interesting to see who bought them and what they're going to do with them. But we're not interested in having, or I'm not interested in having, an urban looking area on Sylvester Road. If I wanted to live in town, we would live in town. But we don't. We live on Sylvester Road. So I want to just underscore what many people here are saying about the ability to choose where you live in Northampton as to where you feel good about living. Some people want to live in town, and that's fine. Some people want to live downtown Florence, and that's fine. But for the rest of us, and the many comments that have been made now, we chose to live in certain areas because of our comfort level and what they do for us. And the thought of building any kind of affordable housing, I mean, that whole affordable housing thing is such a ridiculous statement that you should just knock it out of your dog and pony show. But you can't have affordable housing out here because you could, but you need a car. You can't go anyplace if you live on Sylvester Road without a car. There's no public transportation. There's little gyms on the corner here if you need a quart of milk. But you have to drive to go, obviously, into Northampton to do any business, and also to go to grocery stores. So most people who are looking for affordable housing, this is not the best place unless you want to run a bus out here, which would be fine, but I don't think that's going to happen. So I want to say, please listen to us. Please allow us to choose where we want to live. And please don't turn our areas into urban settings when we didn't choose an urban setting to live. Thank you.
Thank you. Emil?
Hello, my name's Emil. I live on Randolph Place, kind of off of Pleasant Street in Ward 3. And I believe I'm probably one of the only young people here, probably one of the only people who isn't a homeowner. And I would say I'm in full support of increasing the amount of houses that can be on a specific lot. I'm in full support of more affordable housing. And I think that arguments in favor of neighborhood character tend to be, I don't know how to say it, but they're rooted in the exclusionary history of zoning, and that I understand that your neighborhoods are important to you, but what makes the character of a neighborhood are the characters who live in it, not necessarily its suburban environment. Essentially, if it's a suburban environment, it is not sustainable either. Anyway, I would say that I would also like to echo Deborah's concerns before, and I think that they're incredibly important, and I think that the planning board should be in favor, or be much more deliberate in their action to create more affordable housing for the future, because as a young person, I'm afraid I will not be able to live in Northampton in the future, and I'm afraid that also minority, people of color, and poor people will not. And what's more, I would also like to agree with the prior speaker who said, was talking about rural areas and lack of public transportation. And I think that we really need to prioritize urban areas, currently urban areas like my neighborhood, for more housing, because it's already expensive, and there's plenty of space. We just need to build up. Thank you.
Thank you. So we've been at it now for 2 hours. We've heard some wonderful comments and some good clarifications from Carolyn and others. Unless there is new information to come from the public, it would be great if we could turn it over to the board members at this point.
George, and yes, I also liked, oh, sorry, Councilor Dwight. I just didn't know if it would be helpful to, if there are several speakers who asked about, defining affordable housing, and that this doesn't necessarily create affordable housing. And so I just want to clarify this. There are, from the, at the beginning of my presentation, I talked about sort of 4 different approaches that we're trying to address different aspects of housing in the city. And what we're talking about ultimately is attainable housing. And attainable housing means it's within reach for people of different incomes. And it's not necessarily subsidized affordable housing. We do have a definition of affordable housing. The state hospital has the most affordable housing per neighborhood, density wise, of most any other place in the city. This is subsidized affordable housing though, and subsidized affordable housing is built by nonprofit developers, and you have to be income eligible. And so that's a very different definition from sort of attainable housing, or housing that's lower cost for people at different levels. So this ordinance is not intended to be targeted to create subsidized affordable housing, but we do know that it's a piece of the puzzle to allow small bits of housing. We're not anticipating that we're putting urban character into those suburban and rural areas, because their different design characteristics are for urban A, B, and C, and not the Sylvester Road areas or the RR areas. We also obviously already allow accessory dwelling units in those areas, so it's just sort of a half step up and just expanding that the ability to have slightly bigger space for people if they want to live in different areas, and we want to provide opportunities for people to live wherever they feel comfortable or seek housing. So that providing that opportunity in those rural residential, suburban residential areas would do that. And then I think there was a question about there was one other thing I think that came up just about that, that just sort of emphasizing again back to the URB and C districts where we currently allow 2-family homes. So it's not really any change to the Bay State neighborhood. This is not about changing that neighborhood, because URB already allows 2-family by right. So this actually, if you voted this down tonight, 2-family by right would still be allowed in URB.
Thank you. Councilor Dwight?
So the protocols, at least for our rules, is that if we're going to close public hearing, the legislative matters has to do it by vote. And so I don't know if you want to do a last call for and for the public to speak. I don't want to cut off any conversation with the public. And scrolling through the screen here. Last call. Okay, I'll accept a motion to close the public hearing from
No,
someone in legislative matters.
I see
Oh, you see
a
someone?
hand of somebody who's spoken already, but whose hand is up?
Just one comment. Hi, this is Magali at Dickinson Street. I've heard comments from everyone else in the board, and I just want to say I think it's a little disingenuous to call this an affordable housing proposal when it's not. And Carolyn Mish, you just mentioned that, and it's a market rate proposal. We should just be talking about it as that. If you want to bring in more taxes and more revenue, just call it that. Be honest with folks. I have to echo what Ms. Waither on Warner Street said. It's a little tough to kind of trust people when you pass things in the past and things kind of go unchecked. Put sunset clauses. Take in what Ms. Berkowitz said. want to say I just feel like it's disingenuous to call it affordable housing. It should be called a market rate proposal. Thank you. Good night.
Anyone else?
Bill, before you go ahead to the legislative matters to kind of take a vote to close the public hearing, could we do a quick check-in with the planning board? Because if you close the public hearing on your part, that kind of forces our hand, I think.
I don't think so. No, it's a joint meeting of these two bodies. So the planning board, of course, can, all the members of planning board and legislative matters can just participate in the conversation afterwards. It doesn't preclude that. It just, for the most part, we have heard from the public. They're, depending on whatever committee's rules apply, if the public has information as opposed to questions, but more information to provide, they can also be recognized by both committees. It's just for the purposes of identifying this and securing it as a public hearing held in good faith, we just have to go through the, as someone cited, a dog and pony show, but a different one. So I'll accept a motion to close the public hearing from someone.
Move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Okay, so I heard a motion from Councilor Shara and a second from Council Maori, I think.
Yes.
Any discussion on the closing of the public hearing? Laura, oh, there you are. Unmute yourself, please, and please call the roll.
Councilor Dwight,
Yes.
Councilor Maori,
Yes.
Councilor Shara,
Yes.
and Councilor Thorpe.
Yes.
Okay, the public hearing is closed, and George, you're back in driver's seat.
So again, Bill, and excuse me for the public hearing is closed in terms of the legislative matters committee, right? The planning board, still the public hearing is open. So we need to close the public hearing for the planning board.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to close our public hearing.
Second.
So a motion made by Alan and second by Colleen, nay Sam Taylor. Okay. Any discussion on closing the public hearing? All right, hearing none. Carolyn, do you have the 9 names in front of you, or should I try?
Yes, I can do that. I'll start with Sam Taylor. That was a yes. Jana White.
Yes.
Alan Burson.
Yes.
David Whitehill.
Yep.
Melissa Fowler.
Yes.
Marissa Elkins.
Yes.
Chris Tate.
Yes.
Still here. And George Cohout. Did I get everybody?
Yes.
I'm here.
Okay. Oh, and Krista Burnett. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
If I may make a suggestion, George, for members of the public who are observing, it would simplify it for us here on Zoom if you turned off your cameras, because right now we got to scroll through 3 pages for George to recognize which participating member is interested in talking. Thank you all very much for doing that. That's going to make it a little easier for us. Thank you.
Can you
Thank you.
clarify, is the ANR still ahead, George?
Yes, that is coming up. There are, I think, 2 ANRs coming up later in the evening after we hear a large application.
It's, Deborah, just to that point, it's entirely possible that this discussion may be continued to allow, particularly for the planning board, to continue with its business, because as you said, you have a media agenda, and we've been at this for 2 hours so far, and we just ended the public hearing. So that, again, that's up to the planning board, but that's a possibility.
So there's a couple of ways we can proceed at this point. We could perhaps group some of the comments we've heard and put them into clusters, as Carolyn did with the modifications, so that we can at least have them handy for us when we come back to a more full discussion. We could, option B would be to start drilling down through the 10 amendments, 1 through 10. Or we could, I think our third option is to continue this discussion until next week, because next week, our next meeting for the planning board. I don't believe there's any crushing urgency for us to terminate this discussion tonight and make our recommendation. Planning board members, any feedback, or Councilor Dwight?
Just a question, Carolyn. Carolyn, any clocks ticking?
No, I mean, well, once you close the public hearing, then there's 90 days.
Thank you. That's what I
from
that's what I
today.
thought. Okay, thank you.
George, I have a general comment / question. Should I go ahead?
Sure, please do, Alan.
So I have a concern about the whole direction and thrust of the amendments that are proposed. It's clear from all the comments that we've gotten in the last hour and a half or 2 hours, and we've heard it, of course, from many previous planning board meetings, that everyone is concerned about affordable housing. It's the overwhelming problem in Northampton. And I don't understand how this proposal is going to positively affect that issue. I understand the argument about more housing. The price of housing, I think, is roughly determined by the market, what the market will bear, and the cost of the housing, the cost of building it. And what we've done generally 2 things in this package of proposals. One is to allow a builder to build any size second unit that they want to, removing the 900 square foot cap. And that's going to increase the cost of whatever gets built. And the second thing we've done is impose a lot of design and setback and garage and all sorts of a whole other layer of regulation that doesn't apply to a single family house. And I don't even understand the rationale for saying somebody can build a single family house any way they want, but if they want to put a second unit on it, it has to comply with all sorts of regulations that don't apply to a single family house. But what those regulations are going to do is increase the cost. So, I mean, any regulation is, well, that's probably an overstatement, but most regulations that a builder has to comply with are going to raise the cost of it. So I think what we've done, what there's a danger of doing in this package is the opposite of what we are claiming to try to achieve. And I think we got to think about it carefully.
I'd like to, Alan, I think you brought up a lot of really, sorry, can I just jump in? I don't know if there's any protocol here, but I'm David Whitehill on the planning board. Alan, I think you brought up a lot of really, really important issues. I think one thing I'd like to address is there's this thing been floating around for about 2.5 hours that this is somehow like an affordable housing zoning revision, and it's not. I mean, it may affect affordable housing or the affordability of some housing in some way or the other, but it is not an affordable housing bill. And that, I mean, affordable housing, the affordability of housing is a huge issue. As you state, it's influenced by many, many factors, very few of which are controlled by the Northampton City Council, or any government, to be honest, in a lot of ways. So we can do certain things, and there's a lot we cannot do. One thing we can do, though, is make the most efficient use of the infrastructure that Northampton has. We have a crisis, really, in terms of the affordability of our infrastructure as a city. So by bringing more people, doubling the units, whatever it is, into the current infrastructure that we have, I mean, as some of the commenters tonight said, like some of these new buildings are going to be expensive, and they're going to bring in a fair amount of property tax revenue. And all of these current homeowners who are commenting tonight are going to share the burden with these new immigrants to our city who will share in the paying for the infrastructure that we have, and will relieve us somewhat of this crisis that we have ongoing. We cannot continue to just age in place with no growth, because the cost of maintaining the storm and all these other things, as the city council well knows, that's going to keep going up. So we have to make the best use of the infrastructure that we have. So I just wanted to throw this out there that this is not going to solve the affordability crisis in this country or this city.
Thank you. Someone else with a general comment, like David or Allen's? So I would just like to respond real quickly, Alan, and regarding kind of framing this in terms of builders and developers. And I think I heard that a lot tonight. We on the planning board in the past month or 2 months have seen 2 applications come from us for small residences behind the existing residence. And those were by the homeowners, one where they wanted to build a small house for their parents, and one who wanted to build a small house for their son who had special needs, who has special needs. I think I'll pull out that word, which is very tempting, disingenuous, to say these amendments are only gonna provide kind of room for developers to move in. It's really a great majority of them will be the existing homeowner who is gonna do something to alleviate either their family situation or perhaps their financial situation. So I would caution us to think that this only applies to builders and developers, and that all builders and developers are kind of out for their own selfish gain too.
George, very quickly, I think what you say would be true if it were limited to small, like keep the 900 square foot cap. Not allow somebody to build a second unit that's 2,000, 3,000 square feet.
Bill?
Can I ask a quick?
Oh, let's go to Bill, then we'll come back to Jana.
I would just say, to David's point, that you just remember that this is a part of a comprehensive package. It is, as Carolyn gave the presentation, this is one aspect. And as you point out, I mean, we're fairly limited as to what we can do. I mean, we can't impose rent control. We can't require people build various types of housing. We can't, based on affordability. We basically can move and direct and massage the regulations that would promote the expansion of inventory, and thereby hopefully driving down the costs and the demand. But the other things, the other elements that Carolyn has introduced that are not part of this package yet, but will be, comprehensively creates a better environment to promote the development of affordable housing in Northampton. Alan's absolutely right. Every single person who spoke tonight, for or again, all basically reasserted how important it is to have affordable housing here in Northampton. And then, of course, we have the amorphous definition that applies to that's different in every person's mind as to what that constitutes. What is affordable housing, right? But there are actual standards, and those are the standards that that these rules, as I understand, are crafted on based on those national standards and guidelines. So when we have this conversation, I think, you know, it's a little unfair to characterize this as not being an affordable housing proposal, when point of fact, it is one leg of a table that will hopefully present, and hopefully it's it's not like the whole community is going to have a sudden epiphany and suddenly everything's going to be affordable. There's no delusions to that respect. And there are consequences, to be sure. There will be stressors. Every proposed development, every proposed change will meet some resistance. As you know, as a planning board member, there are very few people who come before you who are abutters who say, Hosanna, this is great, you're brilliant, thank you. And what's more likely is there will be resistance in every prospective change. But the fact is that what we need to do is try and concentrate on diminishing the adverse impacts while at the same time keeping the larger picture in mind throughout this, that we literally live and die by our ability to have diversity or not, or basically, as you said, become a gated community for the aging residents who are currently here. So that's my screed.
Thank you, Bill. Jana?
Perhaps I'm wildly misunderstanding what's being proposed. And Carolyn, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought what you said at the beginning is what's under proposal here is that the lot size, open space, and buildable space regulations are not changing in this proposal. All that's changing is that you can now use that space to build a 2-family home instead of a 1-family home. Is that correct?
Yes, with a little bit of a twist that instead of building a 1-family home on the same lot size with an accessory dwelling that's capped at 900 square feet, you can have more flexibility for that sort of accessory dwelling or second unit so that it's not capped at 900 square feet. You can have a little bit more living space that's greater than 900 square feet, but absolutely none of the setbacks aren't changing. The open space requirements for what a single family home would be is not changing. And this, again, I sort of want to emphasize this is, and what Bill said, this is not an affordable housing proposal. That's, I say it again, we're talking about what we're referring to as attainable housing. It offers different opportunities that may be more cost effective for building because there will be one more unit attached to a single family home. So in that same kind of footprint that a single family home would be, you have 2 units instead of 1.
So I agree with David that we need to make the best use of the infrastructure that we have. And so to me, fundamentally, what's under proposal here is that more people should be able to use the space that currently only single family homes are allowed to use. And we heard a member of the public say tonight that people in Northampton should be able to choose the community where they want to live. And currently that is simply not possible because there is not enough housing for people who want to come and live in the city, period, let alone have an option of where they're going to be able to do that. And we need more buildings of any kind in order to make that actually a livable reality for the people who are already here, who want to stay here and who want to come to this community. So I'm not saying that this proposal is perfect, and I'm not sold on all of the particular elements of it yet, but I do think we just need to expand our housing stock of any kind. And without that, the city is simply not going to thrive.
Thank you, Jana. Sam, and then Marissa, and then Gina Louise.
Seems like the residents seem to have a different issue than, honestly, it seems, than what was being proposed. And the number one issue seems to be connected to this recent development that happened in Bay State, where it seems like this developer somehow he gamed the system to build a bunch of single family homes, that seems different than the yay or nay on the proposal now. It just seems like in this process we have to figure out how to stop someone from gaming the system, or I guess you just say, well, all systems can be gamed, and you're okay with that. But certainly during this last one, I mean, I think we all felt like when we were okaying that road that, he sort of got over on us and he figured out how to do it and we couldn't do anything about it. But I think that anger is different than the current thing we're actually talking about.
Thank you, Sam. Marissa, then Gina Louise.
So I generally support, I generally support these proposals and anticipate, voting to recommend, subject to further, hammering out of the details. With that being said, Sam, I didn't feel like we had one put over on us. What I would say is that I was very well aware, and not just on that particular project, but on other projects, that we're often constrained with what we can, with how much we can do to how much we can do to address some of the issues that abutters and neighbors and people in the community are seeing. We just simply don't always have much leeway in that. I do hope as part of this that there will be, and I will say, I don't say this because Carolyn has not, and the city has not been trying and putting out notices about these. We've had the forums and stuff, but it is important that people understand, that people understand what these changes are and how our zoning exists. Anyway, I mean, we're going to have, every meeting we have hearings on A&Rs, which we just approve them. Like there's not discretion. There's not discretion to do something like that. So if somebody wants to parcel their land and it's allowed by right, we cannot deny it. So I think it is important in the big picture. I think this is very important. This is very important legislation or zoning changes. And we must diversify and we must increase the housing stock across all strata of the market. And I think that's very important for maintaining the growth and vitality of this city going forward. And it would be helpful to people doing the work that we do, for the community to really understand what we, what the constraints are and what we can and cannot do within the context of these meetings. I will say, and I was just sad, I just close by saying, one thing that I really enjoyed about the planning board is it is an opportunity to foster community and to foster discussions with, between neighbors and around these issues. And sometimes these meetings get long and things like that, but sometimes really good things come out of it. Good discussions come out of it with neighbors and communities and things like that. So it doesn't happen in every case, but there's a lot that can be done within the context of the planning board, but we can't solve all of the problems.
Thank you, Marissa. Gina Louise.
I feel like a lot of the concerns that we heard during the hearing maybe were around what is referred to as the massing on the lot. Carolyn, I think you've already sort of addressed this, but can you talk more about if there are any changes to that, or there's a lot of focus on this one particular building in Bay State that seems to have taken up a large part of that lot there. And is there anything you can tell us more about whether this changes or doesn't change what's already in the zoning? You're muted, Carolyn.
So this wouldn't address, so massing is about the massing in the proposed zoning is about breaking up large sections of building by creating lower roof levels, attaching structures with different sized, accessory extensions, having projections like offset building blocks, so that you don't have one large rectangular box, but you might break that into two pieces and shift it, or have different roof planes. That is specifically for two families. It wouldn't address single families. Now, these houses that were brought up as an example on Warner Street are 1,800 square feet. That doesn't create a large mass in terms of comparing to single family homes. I mean, that's we have been seeing much larger single family homes built in Northampton. So I would say, anything under 2,000 square feet is definitely on a smaller scale compared to what's been built in recent years. But again, that wouldn't affect a single family house. And then in terms of adding regulations, I think this is sort of a light touch on design. So it's not adding design that necessarily would, I think I'd leave it to the architects to tell me how much, covered front entry adds to the cost of building a house. But there's so many other cost factors that go in that actually, just the envelope of getting the house built within the current stretch code is sort of the hefty bill. And so by adding little things like covered front entries, or requiring that a attached garage be stepped back, isn't really, to my understanding, going to significantly alter the cost of construction. But they do have, even those small elements do provide, and even the shift in massing do provide differences when you look at two different projects. One that doesn't have any kind of street facing covered entry for interface to the sidewalk, and another one that does. And so one is more consistent with how many of the neighborhoods are built out, and the other one isn't. So that's the idea behind these sort of light touch design criteria.
Thank you. David.
Yeah, I'd like to, I want to echo what Marissa said about, I have a totally different take from Sam on what that we, quote, got one over on us by this developer. I mean, the developer did exactly what the zoning says, which is build single family houses in a single family zone. I mean, he did the most standard thing you could do. Now, we may have a lot of commenters here who all live in houses that were not built by builders or developers. I don't know. Maybe they all built their own houses. That's fantastic. The point is that any one of them could, without any review by planning board, knock down the 1.5-story building houses that are in Bay State and build exactly the houses that he built, or a more beautiful version or a bigger version, and there would be no review whatsoever. And that is because single family houses have a special place that can't be touched by review under our current zoning regime. And I think what this attempts to do, which is very smart, is to bring some tiny bit of another housing, barely even another housing type, to be honest, but into that sort of special zone of something that can be done without arduous review. I mean, to my mind, it's still pretty arduous review because there's still all the site plan review and stuff. But I understand, I don't think anybody is coming from Bay State disingenuously tonight. I think they truly are concerned. And I totally understand that. Change is scary, always. What heartens me tonight is that we've had a lot of controversial applications come before planning board in other neighborhoods, and none of those neighborhoods have organized to come here tonight. We happen to have one recently, and I understand it's painful and it creates a lot of anxiety for people, and that's totally natural. But the fact is, single family homes that are a little bit bigger than the single family homes that are next door will not ruin these neighborhoods. I mean, and to be honest, even apartment buildings or affordable housing God forbid, would not ruin these neighborhoods. But the fact that we don't see people from all these other neighborhoods where projects have been approved over the past number of years coming and saying, these houses ruined my neighborhood, don't do this, it's just not the case. And that's something we should take some heart in.
Thank you. So I think we'll have a couple more, and then I really think the planning board needs to think about moving on to their other business items. So Bill, and then JT. Melissa, I don't know if you have any suggestions, any comments before we move on, but go ahead, Councilor Dwight.
Well, George, I was going to just say the very same thing. I have a feeling I am in accord with the intent of these proposals and need clearly to hear more. And I think it's a little premature to allow this baby to cross the street by itself. So I don't think that we're going to end up with an opportunity to vote on this tonight. But I did want to point out there's a 90-day clock ticking. So we're going to have to, in our respective bodies, or maybe as another joint meeting, because I benefit enormously from hearing from planning board members as we go through this. And I would like also to include housing partnership members as well. Councilor Jarrett's been particularly helpful in providing some data for that, but I don't think this is going to be finalized in any way, even the most optimistically, and I don't think the public would be particularly happy if we just sort of punted this and went ahead. So I'm with you, but by all means, JT, we haven't heard from yet, and we haven't heard from Rachel yet either. And other planning board members. So if they have comments, I'm eager to hear them.
Yeah, thank you, Councilor Dwight. I really agree with that. And I felt relieved when you talked about another joint meeting, because what I'm hearing is there's a lot of equations and really kind of predictions about how this will land in the future in terms of how much housing stock we need to be a viable city. And I feel like the planning board, is really versed in these equations, and particularly. So I think that would be a benefit. And I feel like I don't think we're in a place, I am not at a place where I feel like I can recommend or not recommend, or and so I think we're going to need further discussion on this. Thank you.
JT.
Bill, Councilor Dwight, you so eloquently expressed what I really wanted to say, better than what I would have said. So I concur with what you said earlier. And I look at this, and you're going to have, some of it's going to be affordable, some of it's going to be high end, but there's a housing crisis, and that's something that not only that this city has to address, but it's every municipality everywhere. And by what's presented here, I'm in favor for, and I'm hoping that this is something that's going to provide fair housing options for some of the people who have traditionally been left out of the housing market. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thanks, JT. Chris or Melissa, Krista, do you want to chime in at all? Are you okay? Chris?
I'll say something, George, only that I won't say much, because I would just be repeating what a lot of other people said. I think there's a lot of good in this. I think it opens the door to opportunities. And clearly we have some work to do and some more conversations to have. And I think this has been a great opportunity to start that conversation.
Thank you.
George, I would echo the same thing Melissa just said. I've thought of many comments, and then somebody comes up with the same thought I'm having, so I don't need to repeat myself this late in the evening.
Okay, thank you. All right, Gina Louise.
I also just want to say that having this conversation with planning has been very, very helpful, and I really appreciate being with you all and hearing your perspectives. And if we are wrapping up this conversation, I do agree that I'd like to continue it, because I would like to talk more about sort of the late breaking amendments that Carolyn brought in around the general standards. and how to make sure that we are correctly and properly trying to get, meet the energy efficiency aspects of it. So, so I would like to continue that conversation, and I would very much like to continue it with the planning board, because this has been really useful.
Thank you. Thank you. Rachel?
Just quickly, Louise brought up something that I hope, yeah, I think we really need to kind of go over how have we done all we can actually to mitigate adverse outcomes that's in our power. So I hope that I look forward to addressing that all with you. Thank you.
Chris needs to talk. Chris hasn't. We haven't heard
Come
from
on
him.
in, Chris.
I think there needs to be a much more technical discussion about what these regulations are and how they differ from the current. I feel like there's a lot of misunderstanding maybe from the public, what these changes are. I'm also just interested in, do we decouple kind of the primary square footage from the accessory square footage instead of lumping it into one big number that encompasses both? I'm not sure. I know, Carolyn, you said that number may be in flux anyway. And then I was also curious if kind of the newer massing requirements kind of make that happen anyway. If that's kind of built into the massing where you kind of have one larger unit and one smaller unit. But we could certainly discuss that at a later meeting.
Thank you, Chris. Councilor Dwight.
So if I may, I would like to propose that we adjourn the legislative matters portion of your program and then arrange for another joint hearing so we can get down and get granular and get the details that we need to hear in order to make informed decisions. So for that, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, did you want that Laura and I to figure out a date that works for everybody, like an off meeting? Is it your meeting? Is it our meeting?
Carolyn, God bless you for stepping up for that. So yeah, I think, if rather than do that would be great. If you and Laura could get together and figure out what would be the best, most opportune time. And then of course, as I said, there's a 90-day clock. So we don't want to dawdle on this, but Laura.
It'd be much easier to figure that out while everybody is present, though. What about the legislative matters meeting is scheduled Monday, February 8th at 5 is the next meeting of your committee. So I'm just throwing that out there to see if we can possibly settle on a date while we're in this group setting rather than sending out doodle invitations or.
Right. Well, that works out for the legislative matters folks, but it would require the PB folks to see if they want to waste an evening and hanging out with us again.
I also
Carolyn,
would like
do
some
we have-
clarification. Excuse me, Alan. Go ahead.
No, that's all right. Do we have a light or dead Thursday night coming up soon?
So the next meeting is the 28th, but there's the public hearing for the climate resiliency and regeneration plan. I think that could potentially be, just as long as this meeting, that's a public hearing too officially. So I don't know, you'd want to piggyback this onto that. So the next meeting would be February 11th, which is after the legislative matters meeting. I'm pretty sure you will have permits for that meeting. So it might be best to do the 8th because that, pushes it up a little bit earlier. And then of course, you're not gonna have any permits that night.
And also, not for nothing, we have a conflict with the city council meeting. Same time you guys are convening.
Council Dwight, to clarify, were you saying that we'll have a joint meeting with public comment as usual, or another hearing, public hearing?
It's not the hearing's been discontinued, but
Right, okay.
under our rules, all our meetings have public comment to be open. So
thank you.
So maybe we could get a little poll of the planning board members. Could you meet as early as 5 o'clock on, is it Tuesday, February 8th?
Monday.
Monday.
Marissa and David are dubious. Alan says yes. David says no. Sam? No.
I protest. This is totally discriminatory towards people with kids.
Yeah, all of municipal volunteers.
I will defer to all the legislative matters, half the body of our body with kids. So yeah.
So
Do you think a later time on that same day would work? Is that what you're saying?
That would work.
Yeah.
Around 7 o'clock. Would 7 o'clock work? Legislative matters,
Better,
folks. 7 o'clock work for you, Al?
Yep.
I see. Sam, you're shaking your head. All right. All right. I think consensus. I would embrace that.
Good.
I see.
Monday, February 8th at 7 o'clock.
Okay, we'll post it and we'll have a joint hearing. And before I sign off, I just say I'll echo what Council Maori and Council Shara have already said. I really appreciate this joint conversation because it really it gives us context, which we're frequently stranded without. So what I will ask for a motion to adjourn the legislative matters meeting.
Move to adjourn legislative matters.
Second.
Motion's made by Councilor Shara, seconded by Councilor Thorpe. Well, we don't debate adjournment. All those in favor of adjourn? No, damn it,
Wait,
can't do
George.
that. Laura, please call the roll for adjournment.
Counselor Dwight,
Yes.
Counselor Maori,
Yes.
Counselor Shara,
Yes.
and Counselor Thorpe.
Yes.
We are adjourned. And
Before you leave, can
Yeah.
I ask Carolyn one process question? This 90 days is the time that we have before it is delivered over, walked across the street to the city council? Or till it's
Acted upon.
has to be
city
voted.
Okay. And my second.
First reading, right?
Right.
My second question is, does the public have any other opportunities to weigh in on this at the city council hearing or?
Well, at the
City
joint
council.
hearing, at our joint hearing, of course, they'll have an opportunity to weigh in. At the city council, we do 2 readings. So over the course of, there'll be 2 bites of the apple there. There'll be the first reading would be our, whatever the first meeting this appears at. And then 2 weeks subsequent to that, we'll have another council meeting where we vote on it a second time, which, by the way, I should point out, Northampton is the only community in the planet, as far as I can tell, that does that. But it's okay. It's how we do things here, and it's actually pretty functional. So there will be multiple bites of the apple.
Bill,
But isn't that February, sorry, is the February 8th meeting, it's a continuation of this meeting though, and we've already closed public comment, right? So we won't reopen for further comment at that joint meeting.
It's not an official public hearing because you closed it, but I think there was a reference to public comment, so you can opt to take public comment or not. You're not obligated to.
Right. The council rules, under our council rules and under the committee rules, is that we allow public comment on any topic before any meeting, and all council meetings as well. It doesn't count as a hearing. It's not qualified as a hearing, but it does allow for the public to share. We are not allowed to respond. Well, actually, we're in legislative matters. We can respond. We're a little more flexible on those rules, but it's not a qualified hearing. Just to be clear, the hearing it's closed now, but the public still has an opportunity to weigh in, also with letters, but also with public comment.
Wow. So it could be another very long night if 35 people from the Bay State neighborhood show up and reiterate their comments.
That is possible. I wouldn't. Yeah. Listen, you're talking to a body that stayed up till 3 o'clock recently having public comment. So, my hope is that I would encourage them to, if someone before them has already expressed the idea that they want to advance it, they can simply say ditto and pass.
Sure.
But not everyone takes that opportunity because each person has an eloquent opportunity to share their thoughts. So
Okay. Well, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure meeting with you, counselors, also. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
And,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Planning board members, I would suggest that we take, Carolyn is our applicant in the waiting room for the next hearing? Or did they go
No,
home?
I think, no, he's here. He's not waiting.
All right. I would suggest the planning board members, we just take a 3-minute break if that's okay. 3 to 4 minutes. I need to stand up and stretch and do other things. I don't think we need a vote on that.
So be it.
I'll see you soon.
Please go do your other things.
Are you watching hockey? Krista, are you back? Well, one, I think Krista is maybe there, maybe coming. It looks like all the planning board members are back. Our applicant is here. So I thank you very much for your patience waiting for us. We had a busy night here in downtown Northampton. Zoning amendments, I'm sure, will impact the applicant down the road perhaps. So hopefully you heard some of them, some of that discussion. So let's open a special permit site plan amendment for Eric Broadbent and Susie McCrae to exempt certain trees from tree replacement for the purposes of solar access at 254 Old Wilson Road, Florence, map ID 44 to 140. Let's see. Carolyn, any background before the applicant gives us a presentation? Other than
No.
what we saw in your comments? Okay.
Just go right ahead, Jeff.
Go right ahead.
Off we go. Well, thank you everyone for your your perseverance and for pushing forward tonight. It's a long night. Jeff Squire for the Berkshire Design Group. I'll try to be real quick and brief in the interest of time. Am I able to share screen? Let's see. All right. So this amendment request is pertaining to a special permit that was granted to the previous owner of the Pine Grove Golf Course, which subdivided a small portion of the property, the existing golf course property, into 5 single-family lots, effectively, while the remainder of the golf course was donated to the city of Northampton for conservation purposes. Part of that special permit at the time consisted of conceptual house locations and driveway locations. We didn't have a buyer or any prospective home buyers at the time. So, these were, really placeholders to get through the permitting process. The project has since been sold to, a couple who bought all 5 lots, the entire property, with the intention of developing lot 2, which is the site where the former clubhouse and main parking area used to be, for the purposes of their own home. There is still deliberation about what they are going to do with the remaining lots, whether they develop them, sell them off, give them to their kids. So really, this is just about lot 2. Again, lot 2 is the site of where the parking area used to be. The former clubhouse was here, locker rooms here, the driveway, an access drive up to what cell tower that still exists there. And so this is their site. Now that they've got a actual building footprint and house plans and know what they want to do, this is an amendment request to both modify I guess the special permit technically. Even though it's still a single family house, I think what we had shown were, house footprints around 2,800 square feet. This one's 3,400 square feet on 2 levels. There's a basement walkout level, but all the living space is on 1 floor. There's a two car attached garage. They've got a shed. A couple of the amendments, just keeping a portion of the driveway to give them a little bit of room to turn around and maneuver. And then largely, this is going to be a net zero home. And so there's a number of trees that were anticipated for removal during the original special permit. But now that we know, where the house is and what they want to do, again, this is intended to be a net zero home, equipped with solar to the extent that they can cover the roofs. And so part of this request is to request a waiver from tree replacement for what you see the trees in red here. There's a lot of the trees on this site. So this is a panorama of the parking lot looking out toward what used to be the clubhouse here. Their house location is roughly here. This is looking up at that hillside, sort of this location number 2. And then 3 is looking backwards along one of the old cart paths. But really, this is just to demonstrate that what the majority of the tree canopy here consisted of were large, mature white pines that, you know, you're going to provide a lot of shade, cast a lot of shade on the house, but also be a liability to, you know, the new home that's going to sit, you know, close to where some of these are, and several have already, you know, broken in some of these storms. So again, there is still tree replacement. There's still 227 caliper inches of trees, and those have been noted, you know, around the house that wouldn't qualify for the solar exemption, requiring 114 inches of replacement. We're proposing 46 new trees at 2.5 inches or larger caliper for a total inches of 115 inches. And then we're requesting a waiver from those shown in red. And really that's the extent of my presentation at this point. So I'm happy to answer questions or review some of the plans again, but.
So I'll just let folks know that I was able to make a site visit here, and those trees, you know, originally I thought we were kind of talking about the trees and what was going to happen to them, but they've already come down. So that really wasn't in our purview about the removal of those trees. They're not all white pine.
George, why not? I thought the tree replacement ordinance has a backward looking portion.
Well, in this situation,
Well, he just means we can't, they're already cut down. We can't do something to prevent them, whether or not we could or not, but it's just a question of whether or not they have to pay in.
Let Carolyn speak to this.
No, I mean, I think you saw in the original permit that there was a number of trees that were coming down. There are additional trees that weren't quite calculated under the tree replacement that the applicant is now coming in to say, well, we want to seek approval for waiver from the adherence to the replacement criteria for a certain number of trees. So they were allowed to take down the trees. All of the trees are in your jurisdiction to look at, and they've mapped all the ones over 20 inches, which are in the jurisdiction for the planning board to look at. What they're asking now is to say, well, because of our orientation, we've really looked at an actual house plan, cited it on the property. We need to remove certain trees in order to have solar access. So we'd like to ask for a waiver for those in particular. So it's not really that those trees, you don't get to look at them. If they didn't come to you tonight to ask for replacement, they'd still be on the hook for replacing all of the ones over 20 inches because they already got their permit, you know, 3-4 months ago. And that was established then that any trees, you know, over the certain threshold would have to be replaced in accordance with 12.3.
I don't understand why I don't understand why we're even thinking about granting this. I mean, they bought the property, it had this thing, it's done, it's over. I mean, why would we give money back to these people? I don't get it. It's like I went and I bought something and then I use it and then I go, oh, actually I don't want to pay for this now.
So there's a provision in the zoning ordinance that's very specific about the board allowing a waiver for the purposes of providing net zero housing and other benefits to the community. And so it was specifically drafted and adopted by City Council for the purposes of trying to make sure we weren't discouraging people from building solar. But it's a special permit, so it's a higher bar to get to, but it is a very deliberate regulation that was put in the ordinance. And there have been other instances since this has been adopted where applicants have come back to say, you know, now that I look at the site and I have a real plan, I'd like to apply for a waiver. So it's a special permit amendment of that, from that original permit. For example, Habitat for Humanity came and did this on Glendale Road. The permit was issued for cluster. So it's a parallel, analogous situation where Habitat for Humanity got a special permit with the help of the city. And then later wanted to do net zero development, but realized that there were trees in the way of solar gain for those houses. So they needed to cut them in order to get to their net zero calculations. And it's expensive to do tree replacement, and so it's a balance. The city wants to weigh sort of all these goods that are beneficial to the community. We want people to be off of fossil fuels. So how do we do that and balance the issue about tree replacement?
I get that, and I remember the project that you're talking about, but they were building affordable housing in Northampton.
Right.
This is
so
not that. This
right.
isn't even sort of it. They bought a golf course.
But Sam, it is net zero, and it's laid out in the net
But
zero
they
is
can
all.
still have, wait a minute, hold on a second, but they can still have net zero. They just have to pay for the product. And they've already paid for it. So why would I give someone money back out of my pocket?
No, they
That
haven't
doesn't make any
paid.
sense.
Sam, they haven't paid for the additional trees that they've taken down.
But they will.
What you're saying is that they will. What they're asking for is a waiver from these additional trees. So we have
And
to
I'm
judge.
saying, why, like, if good governance is our goal, why would we give money back for the goal of something that they're going to pay for no matter what? Like, I say this, like, as, for example, I own a laundromat. One of the reasons why I have never put in a credit card machine is because people are going to spend money no matter what. And I'm not going to give money out of my pocket for money that they're going to spend. That's just a bad way of running things.
So you're not obligated as a board to approve this. It's a special permit request, but there are very clear criteria in the zoning that allow the board to grant a special permit. So that I included that in your staff report, what that language is. And so that the applicant is coming before you under that specific zoning language. And so that's what you all get to decide. And in addition to being net zero, the project has to create, or one of the options is to create open space for the city. And clearly that cluster open space project was over 100 acres of open space that the city is now developing for the public.
So
is
I
the
think
reason? No, go ahead, please.
the way I think I'm hearing it is that they've already taken down a number of trees and they're going to replace like 46 trees. They're already on the hook. That's part of their plan. This seems like a little piece that's an incentive for net zero solar, an intentional incentive to have folks that are building look into the availability of doing this. So it's not like they're not going to replace trees. They're going to replace dozens of them.
Right.
They're just asking for a waiver for these 7 or 9 trees. They don't have to replace those in kind because they're doing solar. So if that's a city initiative and something the city's trying to promote, then I don't see why we wouldn't approve it.
I think I understand, Sam, why you're reluctant on this issue, but to me, I think if there is a law, I mean, the zoning clearly is trying to incentivize people to go net zero. And that includes not just people who like had a net zero project from the very beginning, but people who have some project and they want to maybe turn it into a net zero project when it might be partially through a permitting process, say, or the protected open space. So I think if we didn't give them grant them the waiver under this, it would be kind of a chilling effect for people to, it would kind of negate the incentive purpose of this zoning, because then people would say, yeah, the zoning says that, but the planning board might not give you the money, so don't do it, or something. So I think that's a problem in terms of good governance. I think consistency is the most important thing, that if the zoning says it's going to happen, then it happens. And then in terms of the bigger project, I mean, I was on community preservation committee when the city bought this land. I mean, there's a lot of trees, and a lot more trees are going to exist because of this overall deal. What pays for it is the fact that people can come in and pay big bucks for these lots and build the fancy house that they want, and that pays for these hundreds of acres and many, many more trees that will live, on the golf course that never would have before. So I think it's a good thing to do.
How many trees are we talking about a waiver for? Is it 45?
No,
No, there's a
eight,
little over
I believe.
180. Yeah, there aren't many. 7 or 8.
8 trees,
sorry.
they were all,
So what is the cost of this?
Say that again, please. I've read this like 4 times and don't understand it. So how many trees is the waiver for?
8 very large trees over that
Okay.
20-inch diameter.
So that translates into how many, let's see, 40 trees, right? That they would otherwise have to plant. Is that right?
45.
45?
45, yes. 2-inch trees,
Mm-hmm.
45 2-inch trees.
And where would they go? That's a separate issue.
No, they're already planning to plant to replace the other trees that they're removing. So the ones that aren't shaded in red, they will be planting all around the site. And that number of trees is going to be 48 to 49 trees based on the number of inches that are come out of those trees that are coming down. So out of whatever it is, 17, 18 trees that are being removed, they will be replacing essentially half of them on site. They're asking for a waiver for replacement for the other half.
And if the waiver isn't granted, where would they be planted? On site somewhere?
On site, or they can make a payment into the tree fund.
Uh-huh.
And how much is that payment into the tree fund?
Well, the most recent value that we had was $100 per caliper inch of replacement.
So if we were looking at another 227 inches were removed, which equals an 18 inches of additional planting. So it would be $1,800 if my math is correct. And Jeff, I don't know if Carolyn has spoken to you about revising the table of the number of trees and the diameter so we can all be on the same page. But she has a note to the board about that. There's a little miscalculation there.
Sure, that's fine. I mean,
so I think
all we're talking
Can I ask a
about
question?
$1,800.
Carolyn and Jeff, if I understand it correctly, if you're saying $100 per caliper inch, And these additional trees would equal about 18 inches of additional tree planting. That's what I see on my note.
No, isn't it based on the amount coming down, not what's would
No.
go up?
So you divide that in half.
Oh.
So
there's 182 inches of trees that are coming down, caliper worth of trees that are coming down for the solar. So half of that is, roughly, 90,
so
91. So it's, 9,000.
10 grand.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, that's different than what I see here. Okay.
Yeah.
So can I ask a question just to clarify? The waiver is because is based on the dollars that you'd have to pay, not that you don't have room to replant the calipers needed to replace the calipers being taken down. This is a fiscal thing. Like, we took these trees down, we want solar, we want to go net zero. It's going to cost us an additional 10 grand. City of Northampton, can you give us this waiver of 10 grand? Because we're giving you a solar house net zero. Is that the basic premise?
Sort of. I mean, the long and short of it is that, they decided to upgrade the house to go net zero.
Yeah.
Because there was going to be some potential savings in not having to replace another, $20,000 worth of tree on the site. So there was some, financial consideration when they were designing the house as to whether they were going to go, net zero and completely solar or not. And I think they, based on their read of the ordinance, there was, the ability to, seek a waiver for those trees. So that's there's certainly a financial consideration on their part when they, were designing the house. In terms of space available, we've got, it's a pretty heavily wooded site, except for, what used to be the old parking lot. And we've got 46 trees that are going to be going into, that site, on that end of the lot in particular. And let me just pull up that slide again, just to, so you can see. Do I have a planting plan? I don't. So, all 45 trees are really going in and around the house immediately, because that's the only space available to them. And to be able to retain the solar access that they, want to retain, they can't, they're not going to put large trees right back into where they, just came out of. So there is some thought about where they place them. I don't know how many thousands of trees were just planted on the golf course property in addition to what was just there. So, they're going to be surrounded by woodlands. I'm not sure we're going to be able to find a home for another 48 trees, to be honest.
Well, what about the other 3 lots? There are 4 altogether.
Well, so Alan, backing up, the original special permit had included tree replacement for all of these lots based on these, footprints and the development that we're showing. All we know right now that is different is this single lot. All these others are, for all intents and purposes, staying the same. There's already tree replacement that's required as part of those that was calculated when we, conceptualized this development. So when those move forward, there is a number for tree replacement for those lots, should those stay the same. If not, we'll be back before you with, with another amendment when those lots and that clearing limit is understood.
So, I would add to this conversation that, Governor Baker tonight vetoed the climate bill, and the express reason that he did it was because of the increased costs of building net zero homes or net zero buildings. The city of Northampton has weighed this and weighed its priorities and what it wants to incentivize. And I don't know why we wouldn't approve this and like $10,000 off the top, added to the cost of making this change to create a net zero home. It's not about our bank account. It's not about the city's budget and the the money. It is far more important that we I think it's far more important that we not feed into, frankly, I think Baker's wrong about that. There's a lot of discussion about that. I will say that if we don't approve an incentive like this that is meant to address concerns about the cost of building net zero, that we're kind of undermining the bigger picture, I think.
So somebody earlier said that basically what's happening is that this owner decided to go net zero and now is coming to us and say, please give me my money back. That's not what happened. What happened is Northampton made a law saying, if you go net zero, we will not charge you for putting stuff into the tree fund for trees that you have to take down to go solar. And all they're doing is saying, can we do the deal that Northampton as a city decided to do? So yeah, I don't care if it's $100,000. This is the deal that Northampton decided to do. We have
How
to do
come
it.
we're discussing it then, David?
I
if
don't know
it's-
why we're discussing it, because people
I'm just saying,
are
like-
having issues with it.
No, I'm just saying if
Yeah,
it's a done deal and
is
it's
that
been a
correct?
law that's been running, why are we talking about it? There must be some.
I guess because it's the planning
David's correct.
board's. It's the planning board's job, I guess, to make sure that they are following the criteria that the waiver that outlines the waiver in the zoning ordinance. That's how I understand it, but I don't see that it's even close to being objectionable.
Yep. Jeff, would
If
you take?
David's correct, I 100% agree with him. So I just don't, is he correct?
Correct about what? About what part?
About the, if this was the goal of the statute, I don't agree with it, but if it was the goal, then it's a non-issue and we should be supporting it.
Right. I would just add, to come back on something comment earlier in the evening, you have to have a rational basis to deviate where there is. I don't know. I wouldn't opine. What I would say is that the standards for when this waiver applies and when you're eligible for it, and I don't think that looking and saying, but they could pay that $10,000 is sufficient reason for us to deny it.
Correct.
That like we determined that they could afford it if they wanted to pay it. That's not a reason to deny it.
You need to look at the language in the zoning to see whether this applicant meets the standard in the zoning. And to the extent that you think that it's appropriate to do that, money is not part of that equation. It's really about, yes, we want to push people to do net zero, and you can't do that probably without solar access, and the applicant has to show which trees in particular they're asking for that waiver. It's not just a random number 8, it's actually that 8 trees that are preventing the house from being fully solar and being able to get down to that net zero. So that's the other piece that you want to look, that's part of the evaluation, is looking at the site plan. Are those trees really the ones that are southwest and preventing this from happening? And you can see that they're saying, yes, we know we owe money for all these trees on the north side, and so we're owning that.
So if I might, Carolyn, that's a really good point, but we never got to look at the site plan and evaluate the trees that were taken down via the solar array. They were taken down ahead of time. So notwithstanding, I guess they could do that. So my other question is, we often, in many of our discussions, our applications, our site plans, when houses are being sited, we encourage the applicant to do them in a way that their rooftops are accessible to a solar array. Applicants will tell us, yes, they're going to do that. They're going to do that. They'll make their house ready. But we don't have any assurances that they are going to put in a solar array and commit that way. So I certainly want to know from this applicant, what are the net zero assurances? And I see in your conditions you have here, the applicant shall provide information with the building permit application about how the new house will meet the net zero standards.
Yeah, and actually, if I could change that, I think that needs to be switched to certificate of occupancy because they're going to have to pay for the
Right.
remaining number of trees. And that would be the time where they'd have to prove, they said they were going to do it. They built
Right.
it, show the proof.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Because, you know, I will tell folks there's a pretty serious debate in the larger scientific community about balancing a large grove of trees and the carbon impact that it has, the carbon sequestered impact, and solar arrays. Sometimes it's a bit of a toss-up. Just because you put up solar on your house, if you remove these really mature trees, it's not always a gain. So we can't just, I think, move forward in a very generous way to say, oh yeah, take those trees down, take those trees down. And somebody puts up 2 panels and adds 1 kilowatt of power to their house. So this is not that situation, but because I think net zero has a much higher standard than just one family residence saying, I'm gonna put up solar. So I support this application, even though I wish the trees, we had a chance to look at the whole landscape and the site and the trees before they were, these 8 or 9 trees were taken down. I think that was a little presumptuous on the builder's part.
So can we have the applicant, we haven't closed the hearing, right? Can the applicant, is this really for solar panels or solar access for a passive solar? Like, what is the thinking here?
It's solar. I mean, it's solar to feed the, you know, it is going to be a net zero house. So there will be panels covering, you know, all of the south side of the roof, the east side of the roof. There were some, you know, some building calculations and measurements done by CET that were submitted as part of the, you know, amendment request.
Did we get those?
They were with the request. I've got them.
Well,
I don't know that I saw the Center for Eco Technology. Did I miss that?
Yeah.
Should have been in the packet.
Okay, here it is. Yeah. Okay.
Carolyn, can I ask, doesn't the ordinance require that they satisfy one of 2 requirements, either affordable housing or a project that results in permanently protected open space?
Mm-hmm.
So does this project, which I guess refers to the construction of this particular house, permanently protect open space?
So this is an amendment of the original permit that included 4 lots plus 1 flag lot. And that cluster permit, which encompasses all 4 lots, was part of the bigger deal to permanently protect 100 acres of open space. So that is tied to that open space piece.
So they do satisfy the requirements in the ordinance?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Does that mean that in the future, the other lots are going to be able to say the same thing?
They could come in for another amendment for those lots, yes.
If they want to go net zero.
Right.
And we do need more examples of net zero housing in the community so we can kind of talk to this.
So I would say the open space thing is much more debatable, because whether they went net zero or not, this would be an open space creating project, just because of it was like the city's idea kind of to make this deal to buy the golf course, et cetera, right, George? I mean, we talked about this on CPC when we walked around, right? So it sounds like the weight of this application is really about the solar access for net zero more than the open space.
They have to show that it's permanently protecting open space in order to satisfy the ordinance.
No, they could do one of those. I don't think they have to do both.
Either affordable housing or open space.
Right. And
I don't think this is affordable housing.
No, they do need to do, you know, net zero plus one of those.
Right.
Or if there is another factor that the board can consider, I mean, it was purposely left open, that there could be some other great thing that at the time city council and the planning board couldn't think of that might make sense to, if open space, you know, wasn't one of those. So yes, that is a requirement, one of those.
Well, all right, apparently they do satisfy.
Yeah. I move to close public comment.
Well, hold on a minute, Sam. We haven't opened the public comment yet. Maybe this is a good time to ask if there's anybody out there in the Zoom world who would like to comment on this application, either for and against. Please raise your hand or cough politely into your microphone.
Don't wait so long.
Okay, hearing none, I'll take, so if we close the public hearing, though, we can't ask the applicant any questions at this point. People feel like they have enough answered. Okay.
Well, I think we may be ready to vote.
Jeff, I just want to make one quick comment. Now that all of those trees have been cleared, that's a pretty steep slope. I'm not sure what the plans are around erosion mitigation, but I imagine you're going to do some plantings on there.
Yes, there are plans for understory and herbaceous, ground cover on that slope.
Okay.
So given that all of this comes out in the wash at the time of CO, it sounds like, when some money does need to be paid into the tree fund, can we ask that like some kind of actual solar analysis be done? I assume maybe CET did that and just didn't include it to show. I mean, it's hard to look at the plan, especially with the topography changes, and say, oh yeah, 22 caliper tree, 80 feet to the west is going to block your solar access. I assume before you put in a 12 kilowatt system, like someone did that analysis. That's a lot of money to spend on a system. So I'm sure that exists somewhere. So I don't know, Carolyn, can we just ask that comes back to us and gets sort of, I don't know if there's a way to revisit like which tree was which, I guess. I don't know.
Well, the trees are noted on the plan.
No, I know that. I'm just saying there's no way for us to say like the tree that's westernmost, like did that one actually affect the solar access for the solar panels? I assume they did that analysis. But
well, yeah, just so you know, I had a back and forth with Jeff about whether or not that would qualify. And I thought, and maybe it wasn't this iteration and I forgot it wasn't in the packet, but I did see an analysis by a solar installer about what shading was happening to prevent solar access for that house. And so, yes, we can do that, but the standard is net zero. So it's not going to be on a panel by panel basis. They just need to prove that they are net zero at the end of the day.
They're asking,
I would like to get that condition kind of nailed down, which would be proof of net zero at certificate of occupancy, or pay the money into the tree fund.
No, sorry. That doesn't, Carolyn, that's inconsistent. They're asking for a waiver for certain trees that they're taking down. And those trees were determined because of solar access. So we can't just say, oh, like if it's net zero, it's fine, because they could, why didn't they add 20 more trees into the waiver application, right?
Correct. You're
right.
I'm
not saying he's wrong. I think it looks right to me. I'm just saying there's probably a plan somewhere that shows the shading and which trees they decided to take down based on that.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yes, absolutely. And I agree that the ordinance was really about only approving the trees that are necessary for that piece. So absolutely, and sort of to work on, I think I heard Chris say that as part of that certificate of occupancy, to have all that documentation in place and that either plant the trees or make a payment into the fund.
It's not cheap to take down a 22 caliper tree, so they're not doing it willy-nilly. I'm sure they're doing it for reasons. So let's just get that documentation into the file.
Yep.
Yeah, and we do that. PV Squared did do a study. Yeah.
Okay.
And that's a helpful thing to ask for in future applications.
Yep. And for us to understand much better. And
I
apologize.
Jeff, I thought it was in the packet, so I apologize.
Jeff,
Motion
there's
to close the hearing.
I have another question yet, Alan. Thank you. Jeff, there's another condition that says there are still some trees on site that need to be tagged and protected during construction. Now, construction has already started. They built the pad, the basement, they're working on the deck. and I didn't see any tree protection there.
I will have to confirm with them because I know that was very clear during the process that they needed to provide tree protection. So I will confirm with them sort of the status of all that. Yeah.
Thank you. Or we'll give you 2 slaps on the wrist.
Yeah, well, we haven't been involved, in the last couple of months other than just trying to get this permit through. So yes, I apologize.
Yeah. Okay. Okey doke. So we'll keep that in as a condition, though. That needs to be there. So.
Yep.
So we haven't closed the public hearing. There's a member of the public who has raised her hand. Would you like to speak to this application specifically?
I would just I just want to ask a question, George, about what you referred to, which is there a process with this exemption that exists? Is there a process to be assessing the balance between the energy demands of a net zero house versus carbon sequestration or the wildlife benefits of such a large number of trees? Do you have a formula? Is there just an assumption that a net zero house is of greater benefit? Because it seems like a substantial, there's clearly an environmental impact on the other side also. So I'm just curious if the planning board or the city has certain guidelines around those decisions.
No, Deborah, there's no formula that I'm aware of. I've seen some data and some scientific journals about this, but nothing that we use as a handy tool to look at a gathering of trees and evaluate those, the height and the width and the type of tree and what they do in terms of carbon sequestration, and also a net zero or solar array. There's no formula that can be used. Maybe our tree warden could speak more eloquently about that, but unfortunately we depend upon someone like CET that was referenced because they are the ones who are really kind of concerned about the energy installations.
Thank you.
Okay, hearing no other comments. Now, Alan, how about a motion to close the public hearing?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Great. So then, because
move.
it's just us, I will ask folks to vote in favor. Alan?
Yep.
All right, David?
Yes.
And Jenna?
Yes.
Melissa?
Yes.
Okay, Sam?
Grudgingly, yes.
Good. This is just to close the public hearing. Marissa?
Oh, definitely yes.
Enthusiastically, yes. But only on
Krista?
account of the hour.
Yes.
Yes, okay, that's unanimous then. All right. Any other questions or discussion for the board before we have a motion on the application? All right. Who wants to step forward? Who's got the agenda in their hand? Sam, you may have frozen if you were trying to make a motion. No?
I move to I don't have a paper, man. I move to support the cutting down of these trees so that I can have a net zero house.
Okay. If you'll give me the liberty to read.
Trees.
I'll just rephrase that to accept a special permit amendment, okay, for this lot in Florence for the waiver of the tree replacement fee. With these conditions, and there was about 4 conditions, and I think Carolyn has them having to do with tree protection and marking of the existing trees, information at the delivery of the occupancy permit regarding the completion of the net zero standards or the attainment of that. And then prior to the issuance of a final certificate of occupancy, the applicant needs to show that 48 to 49 new trees have been planted. Those were the existing trees that were cut down before this operation, and all of the other conditions of the original permit. Carolyn, do you need better language about condition 2 around the occupancy permit?
No, I think I've got it. Prior to a certificate of occupancy, the applicant shall submit proof of achieving net zero and the solar gain from the trees, area of the trees removed.
And if they don't, then
They would replace, if they don't meet that criteria, then they'd be obligated to make a payment into the, or plant or make a payment into the tree fund, in addition to the other trees planted.
And as part of this discussion, we're just going to nail down the size of the trees, the 9 trees that are recently removed, and what this waiver is talking about, because there's a little discrepancy, I think. So we'll need to know that in terms of if they don't meet that condition 2, how much money exactly they'll have to pay into the fund.
Yeah, I think it is 227 trees was the issue, was whether or not that had been tabulated correctly, and that the applicant agreed that they had missed a 36-inch tree. So that's accurate. The number that they had shown for the ones to be that would be part of the waiver was not the issue. It was just the ones that they were going to be replacing.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Any discussion on that lengthy motion? All right. All those, let me see, we'll take that roll call now. Alan?
Yes.
And Chris?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Jenna?
Yes.
Melissa?
Yes.
And Sam?
Yes, but Jeff has to read the Lorax to his client.
Okay. And Marissa?
Yes.
And Krista?
Yes.
Okay, it's unanimous.
This is, I don't know, this end up in the public record or not, but for anyone who hasn't walked over there, it's a pretty amazing thing that the city's done to buy this golf course, and I think it's worth seeing while it still looks like a golf course, and go back in 5 and 10 years. And I think we can see the sort of impact that this long range planning and buying of open space has on the landscape. This is like a small part of what makes that possible, but it's a pretty amazing spot and worth seeing.
Thank you. Keeping your eye on that bigger prize that we have here in Northampton. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very
everyone.
much.
Good night.
I vote to approve them all.
Carolyn has a few other items for us.
Okay, I'm just gonna, I have a, hold on a second. Thought I had this up here. Okay. I'm gonna screen share the A&Rs if I can find them on my screen, oddly. Sorry.
Are you getting punch drunk too?
Yeah. Okay. My share is not popping up the way I thought it would. Oh, here we go. Okay. So I'll zoom in a bit here. The first one is Ladd Avenue. This is the last parcel at the end of Ladd Avenue. There exists, so you can see the paved area ends before this last building. So it's not, it's just creating a dividing line between this parcel right now is contains 2 buildings. This just draws a parcel line between the 2 buildings. So each building would be on its own separate parcel. It's zoned industrial. And it's right across from the old Yankee machine shop. So that's the first one.
That's currently a residence, Carolyn?
Yes, the one side is the bigger building is a mix, manufacturing. I think there's some marijuana processing and then some other use in there.
But the one at the top of our screen is a residence.
It's a residence, but in the industrial zone.
Huh, okay.
So I just need a motion to have the plans endorsed.
I move to endorse the plan.
Second.
Who was that? Melissa?
Melissa.
Okay.
Right. So any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, we'll go to this voice vote. We'll start with Carolyn, could you drop that shared screen for a minute so we could see everybody, so I don't miss someone? Thank you. So Alan, how do you feel about this motion?
Yep.
Okay, and Chris? Good. David?
Yes.
Jana?
Yes.
And Melissa?
Yes.
Sam?
Yes.
And Marissa?
Yes.
And Krista?
Yes.
Just so you know, one thing I also want to mention is under the A&R provisions, actually you not only if the property meets frontage, which this does, but if it didn't meet frontage, there's an A&R provision that requires the board to approve a division if it's creating a separate lot between two buildings that are share a parcel. It might mean that some other kind of relief from the zoning board is required to meet zoning if frontage wasn't being met, but the board is obligated to approve that anyway. But this met the frontage, so it didn't really come into play, but that's just another little glitch in all of it. So
don't confuse us.
Okay.
And Carolyn, these A&R legislation or glitches, these are statewide legislation or just Northampton, particular to Northampton?
It's a state statute, the provision about reviewing properties that are not creating subdivisions, which means they're not creating new street frontage. So it's a state statute. Okay. So the next one is Maynard. This is a lot on Maynard. The applicant's creating a zero lot line project. There's an existing single family home. It's more than the minimum 50 feet of frontage for the new lot. They want to have the flexibility of zero lot line so that, so there's more space for locating the house here. This is almost at the corner of Elm and Maynard. This is the medical office building right here. So I think the plans for the buyer were to put a house, further from this lot line. So they wanted that zero lot line. You're not deciding on the zero lot line, that's allowed by right, but I just wanted to note that that's why these plans mention that.
Would you mind going back to that larger locus map so I can see? I'm a little confused about the medical building and Maynard Road. How does that?
It's not on here.
Oh.
Elm Street is here. This is Maynard. It shows right here. You want me to zoom in with this locus map? Is that what
would you, just for a moment?
Yeah. So this is the parcel in question here.
Okay.
And this is Elm Street right there.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm confused about what we're actually approving. Is it just the creation of the second lot, which is based on it meeting frontage requirements?
Yes, that's
okay,
all.
Thank you. Thank you. I move to approve the A&R.
Second.
Our discussion. Are any of our board members within spitting distance of this A&R?
Yeah, I live around the corner. I've been there. I know where it is. It's
Yeah,
right next to the parking lot.
And me too.
So I just don't know if you need to recuse yourselves from this or.
I'll gladly recuse.
Well,
Only if you're within 300 feet.
I don't think there's a need to accuse. And
Okay, very good. You don't have any financial incentive in this. Okay, very good. So the motion's been made and seconded. We'll go through that roll call. Let's start this time with Krista.
Yes.
Yes, and Melissa,
Yes.
Marissa,
yes.
and Alan,
Yes.
and David.
Recuse.
Okay, sure. David, and then we have Chris
Yes.
and Jana.
Yes.
Okay, and George. So 7 in favor and 1 abstention, I guess, recusement.
Okay, so this one is a little odd. It's on Cook Avenue. Again, it's sort of redrawing lot lines, but this one is in land court because of unclear title. So this is at the back. So basically the Big Y shopping plaza is here, and these are these 2 houses here, and there's a conflict in the deed. And a portion of the deed never got transferred to a party in one transaction, but it did in another transaction. So this is really just cleaning up the deed. No new lots are being created, but there's sort of a swap of land because it does affect the frontage, but it's really transferring the driveway over to lot number 170, which has been using the driveway right along. So they need the A&R because it's a change of the lot boundaries. You need an A&R, but it's subject to the land court adjudication of allowing this to happen. So it's not, so that's what makes it odd and different than typical.
Great, I'll move to approve.
I second.
Moved by Alan, seconded by Marissa. Any discussion on this A&R? Okay, hearing none, we'll go to a voice vote. Melissa
Yes.
and Alan
Yes.
and Marissa
Yes.
and Sam. Surprised you, huh? Okay, and David,
Yes.
Jenna,
Yes.
and who's left here? Krista
Yes.
and Chris. Oh. Chris is our last one. Chris,
Yes.
he's in favor. Okay, unanimous.
Okay. The last one is Federal Street. Oops, I have them in the wrong order. Okay, so this is the project you approved month ago or so. The shared driveway has been permitted, so now this has adequate access. Therefore, you can review the frontage and the division of this parcel here, lot 4, because adequate access has been provided.
So now we are approving the A&R for lot 4.
You're, having the plans endorsed that it's not a subdivision because it's not creating a new street.
Carolyn, for the record, can you remind us all and let any of the public who might be watching or reviewing this meeting after the fact what discretion we would have to deny this A&R?
Well,
if
it's
any.
just like the other A&Rs that you were just approving. I need to make sure the lots meet the frontage requirement, and that's the only question that you can review, except that if, for example, frontage was there was a wetland between the front of the lot and the street, and so you couldn't cross the wetland without a permit from the Conservation Commission. Once the Conservation Commission granted the permit, then you could say, oh, you have frontage and you have access to that frontage. So that's the only thing that would require you to wait for some other action, but otherwise there's no discretion, just like on the Ladd Avenue lot division or Maynard Road.
So as long as the frontage is there and the other permit is not our purview.
Right. The thing about this one is it didn't, because of the steep slopes, it couldn't meet the zoning requirements for a driveway, a typical driveway. They could have engineered something that would meet, the driveway standards. They opted not to do that. So this could have been before you, and you didn't have to see a shared driveway, but they opted to do a driveway not from the frontage. So that needed to be approved first. And now you're just looking at the frontage along the street.
And so as it stands now, since there's the frontage, we don't have discretion, but to allow it. Right. I just wanted to make that clear for the record.
Move to approve.
Second.
Is there any discussion?
Is there any opportunity for public comment or question?
Sure, Deborah.
Just two questions. One was, when I looked at zoning, maybe I misunderstood it. It seemed to me that houses needed to have direct, at the front of the house needed to have direct access to the street that they were on. So I'm not sure how either the White House, which got in it, they had to go through a variance to get that driveway, whether or not the new house would be able to have direct access onto 170 Federal, which is their address. And the other thing is, we were told in the last meetings that the planning board couldn't make a decision. Was required to grant the shared driveway permit, but it sounds now from what we just said, it seems a little circular, like the house couldn't be built without the shared driveway, but that you made the decision to grant the shared driveway, but we were told that you had to grant the driveway. But my main question is, I don't understand the house not having to have access. It seems to me in the code that the house is required to be accessible by the street that it faces, the front of the house.
No, I think that's the whole spirit of the whole purpose.
Sorry.
Is she asking about the existing house at 170?
Yes.
There was already a driveway there.
I can't hear George if you're speaking. If you could.
Oh, we can hear her, George. We can hear you, George.
Can hear you.
The whole purpose,
the new house, the fourth house, not about the house that's already there.
Yeah, the house that's going on lot 4.
So that was, so that's what I was just explaining a couple of minutes ago. The applicant could, anyone, yes, you have to show that you have access across your frontage unless you get another permit that allows you access from another way. And so in this case, the applicant opted, instead of coming across the frontage, to seek a permit that's provided for in the zoning to come from the side lot line. So once that permit's granted, they could come back and then have this lot created. So the previous permit was really just about a shared driveway.
Somebody else will be able to hear the answer. Sorry.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. Thank you, Carolyn. So,
Carolyn, maybe you could just message Deborah that this is being recorded and she can access the recording afterward to hear your answer.
Sure.
It's fantastic YouTube viewing.
Riveting. All of us yawning.
Rue, are you volunteering to tell Deborah?
I think, oh, yes, and I think I was just clarifying what she was, because I heard what she was asking, and her question had been, and so I didn't get I was curious too, because I still didn't understand the answer. She said that she perceived in the zoning that your driveway had to access the street that the front of your house faced. Obviously, Cindy's house, the house that was there, that was built so long ago, that may have been different zoning. But that the new house, according to what she's aware of with the zoning law, should have to access federal street. So we were
The whole application that we heard, whenever that was a few weeks ago, was to allow the second driveway in lieu of engineering a complicated driveway up the slope off Federal, so that they didn't have to put that complicated and possibly dangerous slope driveway from Federal. That's what that whole application was. And that's why I think you probably heard some language in that application about how constricted this board was in approval or disapproval, because the house itself was never really under, there's nothing that's not by right for the house itself. It's really just the access. And they could have built a complicated driveway from Federal and we never would have reviewed it in the first place, I don't think, except as an A&R.
But you could theoretically have not granted the easy access of the.
Only for technical reasons. If there was some technical reason that the shared driveway was a problem, but we're not relitigating that tonight anyway. So it doesn't, I mean, it's.
I just wanted clarification because my understanding was there needs to be some access from the house to the street.
To a street, yeah.
That's what that whole permit was about, to grant that, because that's allowed in the zone.
And the geotechnical review was rejected by the board, even though the city engineer recommended it, right?
Deborah, we're not going back down that road again.
Okay, just want it on the record. That's fine.
Okay, all right, thank you. So, motion's been made, I believe, to accept this A&R. And it was seconded. Is there any more discussion? Okay, so at this point, we'll go through a roll vote again. Let's start with Alan.
Yep.
Thank you. And Chris?
Yes.
David?
Yep.
Jana?
Yes.
Melissa?
Yep.
And Sam? Okay, Marissa?
Yes.
And Krista?
Yes.
Okay, so it is unanimous. All right, I know there was a set of minutes to accept. Last but not least.
I move we accept the minutes.
Wait, don't we
Second.
have to read them over verbatim?
You know what? You can do that, Alan.
Yeah. I'll do it later.
All right, exactly.
All right.
I move we accept the minutes.
I think they were September 10th, October 10th, just for the record.
No.
Carolyn? You just say I'm going to accept the minutes.
Oh, yeah.
I'm gonna accept the minutes from the previous meeting, which was December, what?
10th, I think.
Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Any discussion? All right. Alan, how do you feel about those minutes?
Wait, didn't we approve them?
Not yet.
Yes, yeah.
All right. Chris?
Yes.
And David?
Yeah, great.
And Jana?
Riveting.
And Sam? And Marissa?
Yes.
And Krista?
Yeah.
And George? Okay. Carolyn, do you have any other business to come between this tired bunch of souls? No? Okay, is there a last motion?
Move we adjourn.
I second.
All right. All those in favor, raise two hands. Okay, Carolyn, it's unanimous. Well done, team. A long night.
Well, we don't have to call the roll anymore to adjourn?
I will not be at the next meeting.
Wait, don't we have to vote on that?
We should. I thought we could try to do it just visually, but perhaps we have to do it.
George,
for
you're
the
trying to get the
recording.
whole meeting called unconstitutional.
No.
Motion's
We have to
been
redo the
made.
whole thing.
Certainly we can't do that.
Motion's been made and seconded to adjourn the meeting, and let's call it 11 o'clock. Alan?
Wait, we don't vote on motions to adjourn, do we?
Yes, yeah. You leave
Jesus
before we do.
Christ.
In Zoom, we have to.
Chris,
Wow, huh?
Oh,
no. David,
No.
Yes.
Jana,
Yes.
Melissa,
Yep, yep.
Sam,
He's
Yes.
gone. Oh, there he is.
and Krista,
Yes.
and Marissa.
Yes, and the eyes have
All
it.
right, all right.
I
The
changed my
ayes have
vote.
it.
I changed my vote. Yes.
All right, it's unanimous. Thank
All
you
right.
very much,
All right.
folks. Sam,
Thanks.